Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a world most people only imagine in dusty history books. But you get to walk straight through those towering vermilion gates of the Forbidden City. The stones beneath your feet are slick with centuries of footsteps, and somewhere in the back of your mind you realize, if you had actually lived here, you'd probably trip over your silk slippers and get banished before dinner. Honestly, you wouldn't survive a week, let's be real. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop a comment with your city and local time. I love knowing where in the world you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step forward slowly, the massive gate shutting behind you with a deep echo, like the slam of a laptop lid, if that lid were the size of a building. The noise of the outside streets disappears, leaving only the heavy air of the palace grounds. The walls rise so high they blot out the sky, making you feel like an ant that has wandered into a box lined with red velvet. Guards stand motionless, their stares as blank as security cameras in human form, and you can't shake the sense that every step you take is being recorded. This isn't just a residence. It's an entire universe, built to revolve around one single man, the Emperor. The wind hisses across the yellow-tiled roofs, carrying what sounds like the long sigh of the thousands of women who once lived here. Historians still debate whether every paving brick truly was fired in a special kiln and numbered to prevent theft. But what's certain is this: the ground beneath your feet has absorbed centuries of secrets, schemes, and silent tears. To your left, a small lotus pond glimmers in the afternoon light, petals drifting lazily down onto the water's surface. It looks tranquil, too tranquil, like a screensaver set to serene mode. Back then, some believed bathing in lotus petals could add 10 years to your life. If that were true, modern spas would have gone out of business ages ago. Still, you crouch down and touch the cool surface. The chill runs along your fingertips, as if the palace itself is testing whether you deserve to stay. Far off, the pounding of ceremonial drums reverberates from the main hall, each beat syncing with your quickening heartbeat. A servant girl scurries across the courtyard, the hem of her faded blue robe fluttering like the wings of a moth. You think about stopping her to ask something, but the wary look in her eyes, like you've dropped in from another planet, holds you back. In that instant, you understand. In this place, language isn't only words. It's silence, bowed heads, and fragile smiles that hide more than they reveal. A faint fragrance drifts past, incense, not perfume, burning from a shrine tucked in the corner of the courtyard. The smoke curls upward, soft but persistent, a ritual of both prayer and disguise. While ordinary people outside these walls struggled for food, here a single whiff of incense might decide a woman's future. The absurdity of it lingers in your mind like a half-funny, half-tragic meme. A sudden breeze stirs a golden curtain, and through the shifting folds you catch silhouettes moving inside the great hall. You can't hear the words, but posture alone is enough to guess who commands and who obeys. Maybe it was in this very space that whispered promises were made, or fates overturned, or tears shed silently in the night. And now it's your turn. You, the outsider, drawn into this echoing maze where every wall hides a story. You step forward again, your foot catching the edge of a cracked stone tile, and for a split second it feels like you're walking a tightrope across time. Somewhere deep within the silence, you think you hear faint voices, shadows of history, whispering, coaxing you deeper into the labyrinth of red walls. The echo of those whispers still lingers as you walk farther inside. And then, just like that, the air shifts. Imagine you're a village girl, maybe 17 at most, hands rough from weaving cloth, feet hardened from running barefoot on dirt paths. Then one morning, a messenger shows up at your door with a decree rolled tighter than a cinnamon stick. You are summoned to the palace. You don't get to say no. You don't even get to laugh nervously and say, "Sorry, I already have plans." No, your life as you knew it has just been erased with a stamp of red ink. You try to picture the scene. Your mother bursting into tears, clutching the hem of your sleeve as though she could keep you tethered to home. Your father stands rigid, torn between pride and terror, because to have a daughter called to the palace is both an honor and a silent death sentence. Aunts whisper in the corner, "She's lucky." Cousins shoot you glances like you've won the lottery. Except the prize isn't money. It's a lifetime of walking on eggshells in silk slippers. And if you slip, game over. Even the journey to the capital feels surreal. The cart rattles beneath you, every jolt tossing your stomach. Villagers line the road to watch, some craning their necks like they're watching a royal parade, others whispering about whether you'll ever return. Truth is, most girls don't. Historians still debate whether the emperor's recruiters exaggerated numbers just to make the selection look grander. But what we know for sure is that thousands of hopefuls passed through this process, and only a handful ever reached the inner palace. When you arrive, the scale of the city overwhelms you. Markets roar with the calls of hawkers, smoke from cooking fires tangles in your hair, and beyond all that noise looms the palace walls, vast, unyielding, like the backdrop of a movie set that no one dares touch. You realize this is no fairy tale. You're not just moving house, you're moving into history's most gilded cage. The call to the palace isn't always about beauty either. Sure, looks matter, porcelain skin, willowy frame, hair that shimmers like ink on fresh parchment. But sometimes it's about family connections or political convenience, or simply the emperor's whim. One girl might be chosen because her father supplied the palace with horses. Another, because a local official wanted to curry favor by presenting his niece. And you? Maybe it was nothing more than fate, or the cruel randomness of a lottery you didn't even know you were in. The rules kick in fast. Hair combed a certain way, nails trimmed to exact lengths, speech restricted to the bland politeness of a courtier's handbook. Already you're stripped of your name, your dialect, your jokes. If you'd been known in your village as the girl who laughed too loud at the wrong times, forget it. That part of you has been erased. You are no longer someone's daughter or neighbor. You are property of the court. And yes, I know it sounds like the strictest boarding school ever, but with fewer escape routes. There are stories, half rumor, half truth, about girls who tried to resist. One pretended to be ill, coughing into her sleeve until she fainted dramatically. Another supposedly drank vinegar to dull her complexion, hoping the recruiters would pass her over. Did it work? Sometimes. Sometimes not. And yet, even those who fought hardest against being chosen often found themselves swept inside anyway. Resistance only delayed the inevitable. The strangest part? Somewhere deep in your chest, under the fear and confusion, flickers a dangerous spark of pride. Because while everyone knows palace life can crush you, it can also elevate you to unthinkable heights. Maybe, just maybe, you'll be the one in 1,000 who wins the emperor's gaze, the one who gets remembered in poems. It's like being dragged onto a reality TV show without auditioning. Yes, you'll probably be humiliated and forgotten, but hey, there's still that 1 in a million chance you'll be the star. The cart jolts again, your forehead nearly hitting the wooden frame. You grab onto the side, and the driver clicks his tongue, urging the horse forward. The road narrows, lined with poplar trees whose leaves whisper in the breeze, as though the world itself is gossiping about your fate. You breathe deeply, trying to steady your nerves, but every exhale feels heavier. And then, at last, you see it. The palace gates ahead, glowing in the evening sun like molten bronze. They are impossibly tall, impossibly wide, and utterly final. Once you step through them, you don't come back. No matter how many times you tell yourself you're just visiting, the truth settles in your bones. This is the call you can't refuse, the path you can't retrace. You adjust your posture, smooth your robe with trembling hands, and step down from the cart. A guard's eyes lock on you, expression unreadable. You walk toward him anyway. The echo of your footsteps fills the silence, and it feels like the world is holding its breath. The gates groan open, and with a deep inhale, you cross the threshold. From here on, your life no longer belongs to you. The gates swing shut behind you with a weighty boom, and before you can even adjust to the sudden dimness, the air buzzes with tension. This is it, the day of selection. Imagine a job interview where hundreds of candidates line up in the same outfit, saying the same rehearsed lines, and the boss can fire you just for sneezing too loud. That's what this feels like, except the stakes are your entire life. The courtyard is flooded with young women. Their silk sleeves glimmer in the morning light like rippling waves of color. Pale pinks, cool blues, ivory whites. You catch yourself comparing. Whose hair shines the most, whose posture screams elegance, whose eyes dart nervously like they're about to bolt. It's strange. Half of them are trembling, but the other half look like they were born for this stage. Faces frozen in a serenity that feels rehearsed 1,000 times in front of a mirror. The process is rigid, mechanical. First, a court matron steps forward with a voice sharp enough to slice bamboo. She announces rules you already knew but must hear again. Stand straight, speak only when spoken to, no fidgeting, no whispering. If you thought teachers in school were strict, imagine that multiplied by 10, with the power to exile you for rolling your eyes. Somewhere deep inside, you laugh nervously. You'd never survive. Each candidate is called forward, measured, and inspected. Height, complexion, even the shape of earlobes. Nothing escapes scrutiny. Did you know earlobes were once thought to predict destiny? Historians still debate whether the court really believed such superstitions, or if it was just another excuse to eliminate girls who didn't look right. Either way, as the matron pinches and prods, you realize your body isn't entirely yours anymore. It's an object being cataloged. A girl ahead of you falters. Her bow is too shallow, her sleeve slips down just a fraction too far, and the officials exchange looks. A quiet shake of the head. Just like that, she's dismissed. One mistake, and the door back to her village swings open. But instead of relief, her face crumples in humiliation. The crowd pretends not to notice, but you feel the collective heartbeat quicken. Everyone here knows. A single misstep can erase years of preparation. Then it's your turn. You step forward, knees wobbly, as though you're balancing on a tightrope. The matron's eyes rake over you. Your hair, your skin, your stance. You remember the frantic preparations at home. The herbal paste rubbed on your cheeks to brighten them. The endless drills on how to bow without looking clumsy. Even that ridiculous practice of walking with books balanced on your head. And now it all boils down to this moment. The emperor isn't here in person, of course not. He's far too important to watch every girl shuffle nervously across the floor. Instead, his representatives take notes, faces blank as paper screens. Every tick of their brush is a possible twist in your fate. You try to steady your breath, to hold your chin just high enough to seem confident but not arrogant. It's a balancing act so subtle it feels almost impossible. Whispers ripple through the line behind you. A girl faints outright, collapsing in a rustle of silk. Attendants rush to drag her away, and though you feel sympathy, part of you is glad. It's one fewer rival. That thought unsettles you. Already the selection is reshaping your heart, teaching you that survival here may depend on finding relief in another's downfall. The day stretches on like an eternity. Sunlight slants through the courtyards, shadows lengthening as names are called, girls assessed, futures decided in seconds. Your stomach growls, but no one dares complain. Hunger is less frightening than being marked as difficult. You shift your weight from one foot to another, and the stone beneath you feels harder, colder, as if the palace itself is pressing down, testing your endurance. By dusk, the crowd has thinned. Only a fraction remain, fewer than 1 in 10. And you are among them. Relief washes over you, but it's tinged with dread. Because being chosen doesn't mean freedom. It means you've cleared the first hurdle in a race you never asked to run. The officials lead you to a side hall, where oil lamps flicker against carved wooden screens. The air smells of wax and old ink. A roster is being written, your name carefully brushed in black, sealing your identity to the palace. You are no longer simply a girl from a village. You are now a candidate concubine, bound by rules, watched by eyes you cannot see. And yet, as exhaustion pulls at your limbs, another feeling sneaks in: hope. You can't help it. Out of hundreds, you've been chosen. Somewhere deep inside, the whisper returns. Maybe, just maybe, this is your chance. You close your eyes for a moment, and when you open them, the palace seems taller, darker, and far more dangerous. Tonight, you won't sleep easily. The next morning arrives wrapped in silence, broken only by the shuffle of silk slippers on stone. You wake in a narrow chamber that smells faintly of camphor and old cedar, a room given not for comfort but containment. A maid slides open the door before you even rise, her movements quick, precise, almost mechanical. She bows just enough, her eyes never meeting yours, and gestures for you to follow. You're not given time to hesitate. Today is your initiation. The ritual is older than memory, an attempt to strip you of the person you were before and reshape you into something that belongs to the palace. You're herded into a long hall with other chosen girls, all of you lined up like chess pieces waiting to be moved. The stone floor is cold through the thin soles of your shoes, and the air smells of incense thick enough to sting your eyes. Somewhere overhead, a drum beats slowly, like a heartbeat amplified to remind you that yours no longer belongs to you alone. First comes the washing. Attendants in plain uniforms guide you behind lacquered screens, where steaming basins await. The water is scented with herbs, wormwood, chrysanthemum, and something sharper you can't quite place. The steam rises in ghostly curls, clinging to your skin. You dip your hands, then your face, then your entire body is rinsed with a cloth, each motion deliberate, almost clinical. You think of it as an ancient factory reset, wiping away the dust of your village life. If you had dirt under your nails, jokes in your dialect, memories of childhood games, they're all being scrubbed off here. One girl flinches at the chill of the cloth, and an attendant snaps at her. Another tries to cover herself modestly, but the matron barks a command, and the girl's hands fall obediently to her sides. Humility has no place here. Your body isn't yours to shield anymore. It's a vessel to be prepared, polished, and presented. Historians still debate whether this ritual was intended as purification or as psychological training, a way to test obedience. Maybe it was both. After the washing comes the dressing. Your old clothes, those familiar homespun fabrics that smelled of smoke and earth, are taken from you without ceremony. In their place, you're handed robes of palace silk, dyed pale blue, the color of mist at dawn. The fabric slides against your skin, impossibly smooth, but also heavy, like chains spun from thread. You run your fingers along the embroidery, clouds stitched in silver, delicate but suffocating. It hits you, you no longer get to choose what you wear, not even the shade. The palace chooses for you. Next, your hair. The attendants untie your braids, combing with ivory teeth until your scalp tingles. Oil is worked through the strands, dark and glossy, until not a single flyaway remains. The style is simple but foreign. pinned back with plain wooden sticks, nothing flashy yet, just uniform. It's a rehearsal for the ornate arrangements that may come later, if you rise high enough. You glance sideways at the others. Everyone looks eerily alike now, like dolls lined up on a shelf. Individuality dissolves under lacquer and silk. Then comes the oath. You're led into a side chamber where candles burn low, casting shadows across painted screens of dragons and phoenixes. A senior matron reads aloud the codes of conduct, rules you must carve into your memory. No speaking ill of the emperor. No leaving your assigned quarters without permission. No personal letters to the outside. No complaining about food, clothing, or company. No refusing the emperor should he summon you. The list stretches longer than you can track, and each no feels like another bar sliding into place on the invisible cage around you. At the end, you're told to bow 3 times before the altar, where a tablet bears the emperor's name. The act feels theatrical but heavy too. Your forehead touches the mat, and with each bow you sense something shifting inside you. It's not faith, it's surrender. The final step is deceptively small. A clerk approaches with a brush and ink, recording your name into a register. Except it's not your name anymore. The characters are tweaked, polished, adjusted to sound more elegant, more courtly. You repeat it aloud and it feels foreign, as if you've been reborn as someone else. Your village name, the one your mother called across the fields, is gone, sealed away with the clothes they took from you. As you rise, the hall is silent except for the scratching of brushes. The air is thick, charged, as though even the walls know you are no longer just a girl. You are a concubine in training, a cog in the vast machinery of empire. Outside, a bell tolls, deep and resonant. The sound vibrates in your chest. Somewhere in another wing, the emperor himself is likely having breakfast, oblivious to your trembling hands. To him, you are one of many. To you, he is now the center of your universe. That night, lying on a thin pallet in a chamber shared with a dozen other girls, you stare at the ceiling beams. Every creak makes you flinch. You replay the day, the steam rising from the basins, the snap of attendants' voices, the brush carving away your old self. You realize you've crossed a threshold you can't return from. And yet, even with fear pressing heavy against your ribs, you find yourself imagining the possibility. The impossible chance that one day the emperor might notice you. That thought, foolish as it is, keeps you awake long after the lamps are extinguished. The next few days slide by in a blur, and already you can feel the weight of rules pressing down like an invisible hand. If the initiation was the palace's way of stripping you of your old identity, now comes the part where it teaches you to live under constant watch. These aren't just rules, they're reflexes you're supposed to absorb so deeply that you stop noticing them. Imagine installing a new operating system in your brain, but the kind that punishes you with exile or worse if you click the wrong button. You wake before dawn every morning to the clang of a bell. Not when you want to, not when your body's ready, when the palace commands. If you linger, even for a heartbeat, the matron's voice snaps across the dormitory like a whip. You shuffle into line, robes perfectly smoothed, hair pinned in exactly the approved style. Stray strands? Unacceptable. Wrinkled hem? Unforgivable. The palace has no patience for lazy mornings. Food, too, becomes a rule. Meals are plain, measured, predictable. Rice, pickled vegetables, a small portion of fish if you're lucky. You're not allowed to complain, not even when the rice tastes slightly sour or the broth is lukewarm. One girl mutters that the porridge is too thin, and within minutes she's being dragged away by attendants for discipline. She returns later with eyes red and lips sealed tight. No one asks what happened. No one dares. Even the way you walk is dictated. Steps must be small, measured, knees never lifting too high, sleeves flowing gracefully. To practice, you balance a flat board on your head, pacing back and forth in the training hall until your neck aches. If you stumble, you start again. One girl falls hard enough to scrape her knee, but when she gasps in pain, the matron simply says, "A concubine does not bleed." You realize quickly that here, even your body is not allowed to be human. The strangest part is how silence dominates everything. You're discouraged from speaking freely. Every word should be restrained, polished, safe. When you do talk, it's in a soft, lilting tone, never loud, never sharp. Laughter is dangerous unless it's perfectly timed. Jokes are unthinkable unless they flatter someone above you. In a place where walls have ears, your voice itself is a liability. You wonder how long before you start censoring even your own thoughts. Historians still debate whether these endless rules were really about morality or simply control. Some argue that the strict codes ensured harmony in a space where hundreds of women lived together. Others insist they were about erasing individuality, breaking you down until you fit the mold of obedience. Whatever the truth, it works. You already notice yourself bowing lower, speaking less, glancing over your shoulder before daring to breathe too freely. One evening, you discover the rule about light. After sunset, you may not keep a lamp burning in your chamber without permission. A single flicker of flame can mark you as suspicious. Why? Because light attracts attention, and attention is power. You learn this the hard way when a girl tries to read a scroll under the glow of a tiny candle. The matron storms in, her fury more terrifying than fire itself. The girl's scroll is seized, her candle snuffed, and she spends the night kneeling outside in the cold. When she returns, her voice is gone, hoarse from the chill. And then there's the strangest rule of all: how you breathe in the emperor's presence. You're told that if, by some twist of fate, you're summoned, you must not cough, sneeze, or sigh. In fact, you should breathe so softly that he doesn't notice. Imagine trying to exist while also pretending you don't exist. That's the paradox of palace life. At times, the rules feel absurd. One morning you hear whispers that long ago, women were once forbidden from stepping on certain tiles because the patterns resembled imperial dragons. To tread on them was seen as disrespect. No one's quite sure if it's true. Historians argue over whether this was symbolic or just rumor, but the fear still lingers. Even now, you catch yourself watching the ground, terrified you might accidentally step where you shouldn't. Yet, despite the suffocating strictness, a dark kind of humor creeps in. You notice that everyone walks with the same stiff posture, speaks with the same polished phrases. It's like you've all become characters in a play, performing identical roles, hoping the audience, the emperor, the empress, the endless eyes of the court, will not boo you off stage. If you were to joke about it, you might call it the longest reality show in history, except there's no commercial break, no elimination vote, and certainly no prize money. But here's the secret you're starting to learn. The rules aren't just prison bars. They're also weapons. Girls who master them gain a strange kind of power. If you can bow more gracefully than the rest, if you can hold a smile longer without letting it falter, if you can recite the codes flawlessly, you stand out. In a world where everyone is reduced to silence, even the smallest gesture of perfection becomes a shout. That night, lying in bed, you listen to the faint shuffle of footsteps in the corridor. Someone is still awake, pacing, maybe plotting. The matron's voice echoes in your memory. A concubine does not bleed. A concubine does not complain. A concubine does not forget. You close your eyes, but the words cling like cobwebs. And you realize that the palace hasn't just locked the doors behind you. It's starting to lock the doors inside you, too. The night after your initiation, you think you'll finally get a moment to rest. But the palace has other plans. When the lamps are dimmed and the corridors fall silent, your nerves only grow sharper. Tonight is your first night sleeping as a candidate concubine inside these walls, and it feels less like bedtime and more like being dropped into a suspense film where the danger hides in whispers you can't quite hear. Your bed is little more than a low pallet stuffed with straw, a thin quilt folded neatly at the corner. You're squeezed in with a dozen other girls, the air thick with the scent of perfume that can't quite mask nervous sweat. Every shift of fabric sounds loud in the silence. You lie still, heart beating against your ribs like a trapped bird, listening to the shuffle of footsteps outside, the soft creak of wooden beams, the occasional distant clang of a guard's weapon against stone. Sleep refuses to come. And then, the first ritual of the night, the roll call. Just when your eyelids finally begin to droop, the door slides open with a squeal, and a matron's lantern floods the room with harsh light. She calls each name, her voice brisk, eyes sharp enough to slice through excuses. You answer with a bow of your head and a soft present. It doesn't matter if you were half asleep, or if your throat aches, you answer perfectly. A girl who mumbles gets her name repeated louder, each echo a warning. You make a silent note. In the palace, even the act of being present must be rehearsed. Later, when the lanterns are extinguished again, you realize that the darkness here is different. It isn't comforting like the night sky of your village, where crickets chirped and the stars blinked like tiny companions. No, this darkness is thick, heavy, claustrophobic. You hear every sound amplified. A girl's suppressed sniffle, another's shallow breathing, the rustle of someone turning over too quickly. It's like living inside a microphone, with silence as the background hum. The strangest part is the fear that presses in around you. Not fear of ghosts, though palace legends say there are plenty. Not even fear of punishment, though that lurks in every corner. No, it's the fear of being watched. The sense that even in sleep, you're not safe from scrutiny. You can't shake the image of guards outside, of the Empress's attendants taking secret notes, of the palace itself leaning down to memorize the rhythm of your breath. And yet, tucked beneath all that anxiety is curiosity. You wonder what the Emperor is doing at this very moment. Is he awake in his chambers, surrounded by silk and gold? Or is he asleep, unaware that dozens of young women are lying awake because of him? It's a strange thought that your entire life now revolves around a man who doesn't even know your face yet. Like falling in love with a stranger's Instagram profile, except you don't have the choice to unfollow. At some point, drowsiness finally drags at your limbs. You drift into uneasy half-sleep, filled with disjointed dreams. Red walls rising higher and higher until they block the sun. A matron's eyes glowing like coals in the dark. A lotus petal dissolving into water before you can catch it. You wake with a start when one of the girls beside you mutters in her sleep, her words too slurred to understand. For a moment, you think she's speaking directly to you. Historians still debate whether palace life was harsher at night than during the day. Some records suggest strict inspections continued into the small hours, designed to keep concubines alert, obedient, and pliable. Others argue the rules were exaggerated later to make palace life sound more tragic. Either way, you feel the truth in your bones. Even in sleep, there's no escape. By dawn, when the bell clangs and attendants slide the doors open, you're bleary-eyed, body stiff from lying so still. The other girls rise quickly, smoothing their robes, pinning back their hair with practiced motions. You mimic them, though your fingers fumble with the pins. You catch sight of yourself in a polished bronze mirror, eyes rimmed with fatigue, lips pressed tight. Already, the palace is changing you, and as you shuffle back into line for morning drills, a single thought flickers across your mind. If the first night felt like this, how many more can you survive? The courtyard fills with the sharp scent of incense and polished wood as dawn fully breaks. You shuffle into the hall with the others, still aching from the sleepless night. But here there's no space for yawns or slouched shoulders. Today you learn the rules, not just how to sit, how to bow, how to eat without making a sound, but also where exactly you stand in this vast, glittering machine called the imperial harem. And spoiler alert, you're not standing very high. At the very top of this pyramid sits the empress. She's the official wife, the one whose robes are embroidered with dragons curling across her chest, whose slightest smile can tilt the balance of the palace. They say her power rests not only on her marriage to the emperor but also on her role as mother to the entire empire. In practice, that means she's both your boss and your judge. You might imagine her as the CEO in a corporate skyscraper, except here the skyscraper has golden roofs and thousands of lives dangling on her decisions. Below her are the consorts, ranked with titles that sound delicate but carry the weight of armies. Noble consort, pure consort, worthy consort. Each name is embroidered onto silks, chanted in rituals, carved into the memory of every servant. These women aren't just pretty faces, they're political chess pieces. Many of them come from powerful clans, their presence in the palace meant to bind families to the throne. Historians still argue whether the system was designed to keep the emperor entertained or to keep the empire stable, but either way, it worked a little too well. One wrong alliance, and a whole family outside the walls could rise or fall. Further down, the titles multiply like subfolders in a cluttered email inbox. Lady of Grace, Talented One, Beautiful Companion. Each rank comes with a specific number of attendants, a budget of robes, and even a designated place to stand during ceremonies. You think about it as a never-ending spreadsheet, with the emperor as the only one allowed to edit cells. If your name appears low on that sheet, don't expect anyone to fetch your tea. And then there's the bottom. The apprentices, the maids elevated as candidates, the nameless girls like you who are technically part of the harem but hold no title worth announcing. You're a draft version, a footnote in the system, one of many waiting to see whether fortune or disaster chooses you. It's sobering and a little humiliating to realize that right now, your rank in this palace is basically the equivalent of unpaid intern. The lesson isn't given kindly. The matron lays out the hierarchy like she's reading a menu, her tone clipped, her eyes scanning each of you as if testing whether you've already memorized your place. You feel the weight of the system pressing down on your shoulders, a ladder so tall you can't even see the top rung. And yet, your fellow girls aren't just listening, they're studying. Every tilt of their head, every flick of their gaze carries calculation. You can practically hear their minds whispering, "How do I climb? Who do I flatter? Who do I avoid?" As you stand in line, your stomach tightens. This isn't simply about who's prettiest or who can flutter her fan most elegantly. It's about survival. If the Empress favors you, doors open. If she frowns, even slightly, you'll be crushed before you rise an inch. And if you somehow catch the Emperor's attention, well, that's where things get complicated. To be chosen is a dream, but it's also a trap. You gain protection and power, but you also paint a target on your back. It's like being the top scorer in a video game everyone else is playing with knives. Later that day, as you sweep through another courtyard under the burning sun, you hear older servants whispering about past scandals. A favored concubine who supposedly poisoned another's soup. A lady stripped of her title because she sneezed during a ceremony and offended heaven. Stories so absurd you'd laugh if they weren't warnings in disguise. Whether they're true or exaggerated hardly matters. The point is clear. Mistakes are fatal and everyone is replaceable. You glance toward the palace roofs, golden tiles flashing against the blue sky. The architecture is breathtaking, symmetrical perfection stretching as far as your eye can see. But underneath that order lies chaos. You're inside a game of survival dressed up as ritual, a hierarchy so intricate that even historians admit they still debate the exact number of ranks and subranks. Some records list 8 levels, others 12. What's undeniable is that every single woman here knows her number, and that number defines her existence. As the sun sets and the drums echo once more across the courtyards, you feel it settle into your bones. This isn't just a home for the emperor. It's a theater, a battlefield, and a prison all in one. And tonight, as you return to your shared quarters, you can't help but whisper to yourself, climbing even one rung on this ladder might cost more than you ever imagined. You wake the next morning to a chorus of rustling silk and hushed voices, the kind that pretend to be polite but drip with judgment. Today, you're about to discover one of the palace's most vital survival skills, the art of appearance. Not just what you wear, but how you wear it, how your skin glows under lantern light, how your hairpins catch the sun. Welcome to the endless, exhausting theater of beauty maintenance. Your first lesson comes in the form of powders. The senior attendant sweeps into the room with trays balanced like sacred relics. Jars of pearl dust ground so fine it looks like moonlight captured in clay, cakes of pressed rice powder wrapped in silk, and even the occasional concoction whose smell alone makes you gag. One girl whispers that some mixtures contain pulverized shells or ground fish scales. Another swears she heard about crocodile dung being used by women in distant lands as sunblock. You try not to picture yourself smeared with that while attending an imperial ceremony. When you finally touch the pearl powder to your skin, it feels soft but heavy, like you're wearing a mask. The mirror, a polished bronze disc propped against a carved stand, shows a version of you that doesn't look like you at all. Paler, flatter, almost ghost-like. But here, paleness equals elegance. It says you don't toil under the sun, you don't labor in fields, you are delicate, untouchable. Basically, it's the imperial equivalent of posting a filtered selfie, but one you can't turn off. Next come the rouges. Made from safflower petals, crushed cinnabar, sometimes even toxic minerals, these paints could kill you slowly if applied every day. And yet, you dab them onto your lips, your cheeks, your eyelids, because what's beauty without a little danger? History books still puzzle over just how many women in the palace succumbed to the slow poisoning of their own beauty routines. Some scholars argue the quantities were too small to matter. Others point to mysterious illnesses that conveniently aligned with cosmetic trends. Either way, no one here seems particularly worried. After all, survival today is worth more than tomorrow's health. Perfume is its own battlefield. Tiny pouches of dried flowers dangle from belts, sachets tucked into sleeves, even fans soaked with aromatic oils. The right scent can make you memorable. The wrong one can brand you vulgar. You quickly notice how certain girls lean closer to attendants, letting their sandalwood linger, while others trail faint whiffs of plum blossoms as they walk past. It's like walking through a live commercial for luxury perfumes. Except no one dares say the brand name out loud. And then there's hair. Hours are spent twisting, braiding, pinning, weaving strands into sculpted towers secured with jade and gold. Each ornament declares something. Status, mood, sometimes even hidden messages. A phoenix hairpin might signal ambition, a lotus comb humility. You can't help but laugh quietly when one girl stabs herself in the scalp with a needle-like pin, yelps, and then pretends nothing happened. Glamour hurts, literally. The cosmetics aren't just decoration. They're weapons, soft ones, designed to attract attention and assert hierarchy without a word spoken. A single shade of silk combined with the right powder can whisper, "I am more favored than you." You begin to realize that beauty here isn't about being beautiful. It's about being strategic. And the training never ends. Each night, you hear the whispers of secret remedies. Crushed pearls dissolved in wine to brighten the skin. Donkey-hide gelatin boiled down for eternal youth. Even mercury drops for radiance. You lie awake on your bamboo mat, stomach twisting at the thought of sipping metal like it's juice. The others chatter as if this is perfectly normal. like swapping skincare tips in a dorm room, except every mask might shave years off your life. One afternoon, while the sun scorches the stone courtyard, you sneak a glance at a group of higher-ranked ladies passing by. Their faces gleam like porcelain, perfectly powdered, untouched by heat or sweat. You wonder how they manage it, then notice the train of maids fanning them from every angle. Of course, privilege doesn't just mean access to better cosmetics. It means never having to risk them melting off in the first place. By now, you've memorized dozens of strange recipes and rules, but the most important lesson is unspoken. Beauty is currency. A smudge of powder can buy attention. A blush too heavy can cost you favor. And you, caught in this delicate economy, must spend wisely. As the candles burn low that night, you trace your face in the mirror, half covered in powder that smells faintly of earth and flowers. You can't decide if you look like yourself anymore, or like someone else's painting of you. Maybe that's the point. The palace doesn't want you. It wants a version of you that fits perfectly into its gilded puzzle. And as you lie down, careful not to smudge your carefully painted lips, you can't help but think. In here, even sleep feels like part of the performance. Tonight, the palace comes alive in a way you've never seen before. Lanterns flicker along carved beams, their glow bouncing off gold-plated dragons and painted ceilings so high you almost get dizzy staring upward. The air hums with anticipation, and somewhere deep in the kitchens you catch the faint metallic clang of bronze cauldrons and the rising hiss of oil. You're about to attend your very first imperial banquet, and trust me, this is not the casual buffet where you awkwardly stand near the shrimp platter. This is theater, politics, and survival, all served on porcelain plates. You shuffle into the hall with dozens of others, the soles of your embroidered shoes whispering against polished tiles. The smell hits you first: ginger, garlic, sesame oil, hints of roasted meats, the sweet tang of fermented plum. It's overwhelming and intoxicating, like wandering into a spice market at midnight, except here every aroma has been staged to perfection. The seating is where the performance begins. Everyone knows the closer you are to the emperor, the hotter your prospects. The distance between your cushion and his jade-studded throne is basically a social barometer. The highest-ranked consorts float to the front like swans, while others, including you, find yourselves further back, silently measuring how many cushions stand between you and glory. You're pretty sure modern seating charts at weddings were inspired by this system, except here, people might poison your wine glass if you steal their seat. The food itself is magnificent, yet loaded with silent messages. Platters arrive in steady procession. Roasted duck lacquered until the skin gleams, steamed fish draped in ginger and scallion threads, lotus root soups glistening in porcelain bowls. But notice this: each dish is layered with symbolism. The fish represents abundance, the lotus purity, the duck loyalty. It's less about taste and more about the emperor subtly reminding you of your role. Imagine if you got served kale every time your boss wanted to remind you to work harder. A servant sets a delicate dish before you: swallow's nest soup. It looks innocent enough, a glistening broth with translucent strands floating like glass. But you know this delicacy was harvested from caves, where men risked their lives climbing sheer cliffs to scoop out hardened saliva. You take a sip, trying not to think about it, and your lips press into what you hope looks like bliss. Across the room, another girl pretends to cough so she can avoid swallowing hers. You can't help but stifle a laugh. Wine flows too, sweet and strong, poured into shallow cups of jade or porcelain. But here's the trick. You must drink just enough to seem joyful, never enough to lose composure. A single slip of the tongue after too much rice wine could end a family line. You remember a whispered story. One concubine once sang too loudly at a banquet after 3 cups too many, and the next morning she was mysteriously relocated to a distant palace wing. Some historians still argue whether her disappearance was punishment or coincidence, but everyone in this hall takes the hint. Between courses, entertainers glide in. Dancers with sleeves so long they brush the floor, musicians plucking pipa strings that sound like rain tapping bamboo, jugglers tossing porcelain bowls in dizzy arcs. You watch the emperor smile faintly, and suddenly the whole room lights up, as though every woman here is trying to beam sunlight back in his direction. It's exhausting just to keep up, like competing for attention on a stage where the audience only ever applauds one person. Even the way you hold your chopsticks is under scrutiny. Too clumsy, and you look uncouth. Too graceful, and someone might accuse you of showing off. You practice subtlety, lifting a dumpling with surgical care, chewing slowly so your face doesn't contort into anything unbecoming. One girl nearby bites too fast, and the soup inside bursts, splattering her silk sleeve. She freezes, wide-eyed. The silence lasts half a heartbeat, then laughter trickles across the table like spilled wine. The poor girl smiles weakly, but you can see her hand trembling as she sets the chopsticks down. Toward the end of the night, dessert arrives. Sticky rice balls filled with black sesame paste, their sweetness meant to symbolize harmony. You bite into one, the filling oozing warmth onto your tongue, and for a moment it's the first bite all evening that feels like real comfort food. Sweet, grounding, familiar. But then you catch the Empress's gaze sweeping across the hall like a hawk circling prey, and the comfort evaporates. You're reminded that nothing here is just food. Every grain of rice, every drop of wine, every smile is calculated. And yet, as the night winds down, you notice something strange. The women closest to the throne smile, but their eyes look tired, guarded. The ones further back, like you, whisper and giggle softly, stealing glances at the entertainers, enjoying crumbs of freedom that come from being overlooked. You wonder which side is luckier, the ones under constant spotlight or the ones allowed to melt into shadow. When the banquet finally ends, lanterns dimmed and platters cleared, you step outside into the cool night air. Your stomach is full, your face aches from practiced smiles, and your mind races with all the unspoken rules you've just witnessed. For the first time, you realize that the Emperor's attention isn't the only prize here. Survival itself is. And as the cicadas hum somewhere in the garden beyond the walls, you can't help but laugh quietly to yourself. Who knew dinner could feel like taking an exam where the questions were written in invisible ink? You wake the next morning still tasting plum wine on your tongue, though you're not sure if it's real or just a phantom memory of last night's banquet. Either way, your stomach knots the moment you remember what really matters now. The games. Not the kind with dice or cards, though that would be way simpler. No, these are games of whispers, alliances, and daggers hidden behind silk sleeves. If last night was theater, today is the rehearsal that never ends. The palace has a rhythm, one you're slowly learning to hear beneath the rustle of gowns and the echo of footsteps. At dawn, the senior concubines rise like clockwork, their servants fussing with hairpins and cosmetics as though preparing them for battle. In truth, that's exactly what it is. Every glance, every bow, every pause before speaking strategic. And you, still new to this invisible chessboard, hover near the edges trying to read the rules before someone flips the board and takes your head off. Alliances here are stitched together like embroidery, delicate, colorful, but one tug and the whole thing unravels. You notice pairs of women whispering in shaded corridors, giggling in shared chambers, exchanging silk fans like secret tokens. A fan handed over too quickly means trust. A fan accepted too slowly means doubt. And if no fan is exchanged at all, that's a cold war with lace and tassels. Modern high school cliques have nothing on this. At least back then, no one got exiled to a remote palace wing for choosing the wrong lunch table. You quickly learn that the emperor is less a man and more a prize. His presence dictates everything, but his absence is where the real maneuvering happens. In those gaps of time, women build coalitions like politicians. Group dinners, private poetry sessions, even sharing embroidered handkerchiefs that double as silent promises. Some swear loyalty to the empress, hoping her protection will shield them. Others gamble on a powerful eunuch, whispering into his ear in exchange for accidental opportunities to meet the emperor. You hear tales of one eunuch so skilled at matchmaking he practically ran a dating service inside the Forbidden City. Historians still debate whether he wielded more influence than some ministers. Your first taste of this politicking comes when a slightly older concubine, draped in pale lavender silk, approaches you with a smile sweet enough to make your teeth ache. She compliments your hairpin, asks about your calligraphy, then, without missing a beat, mentions that she sometimes hosts little poetry circles in the evening. You're invited, of course. Sounds harmless, right? Except her circle is notorious for attracting women aligned against the empress. Accepting the invitation might put you on one side of the battlefield. Declining might make you look arrogant. Either way, you're stuck. You nod politely, heart pounding, praying your face doesn't reveal the panic bubbling underneath. You soon realize alliances don't just involve words. They involve gifts. A bolt of rare silk here, a tray of candied lotus seeds there. Even small trinkets, a carved jade hairpin, a vial of scented oil, become tokens of allegiance. But gifts come with strings. Accept a bracelet and you've practically signed a contract. Decline and you've made an enemy. It's like receiving a friend request you can't ignore without consequences. One afternoon, you overhear two women arguing softly near the lotus pond. Their voices are hushed, but sharp enough to cut through the hum of cicadas. Apparently, one had promised to share a favored eunuch's attention, then secretly monopolized him for weeks. The betrayal left the other seething. They exchange words masked in politeness, but you can hear the venom beneath. A dropped phrase, "May your embroidery always hold," sounds like a blessing, but you recognize it for the curse it is. They part smiling, but you know daggers have been drawn. The emperor himself occasionally stirs this pot without even realizing it. A simple gesture, handing one woman a fruit from his plate, or pausing to compliment another's gown, can ignite a ripple of jealousy that echoes for weeks. Some concubines exploit this, dressing in colors that echo the empress's, or memorizing obscure poems they know the emperor once recited in his youth. Others go further, bribing servants to casually remind him of their charms. You've heard whispers of women sending perfume into his chambers, their scent lingering before they ever enter. Whether it works or not, no one can say, but the creativity alone deserves applause. And yet, beneath all this maneuvering, you sense something deeper: fear. Every smile, every alliance, every whispered plan is rooted in the knowledge that one misstep can erase you. There are stories, oh, always stories. One concubine supposedly formed a small coalition, securing friendships with 4 others. Together, they presented themselves as a united front, believing numbers would shield them. For a while, it worked. They dined together, supported each other, even shared hairdressers. But when one of them received a private summons to the emperor, the rest turned on her, whispering betrayal. Within months, their little alliance collapsed, and all 5 were scattered to separate wings of the palace. Historians still argue whether the emperor engineered this or whether human envy did the work for him. Sometimes you wonder if true friendship is even possible here. You recall a moment from earlier in the day, when a younger concubine stumbled over her robes and nearly fell. Another girl rushed forward, catching her by the elbow with genuine concern. Their laughter echoed in the hall, warm and unguarded. For a heartbeat, you wanted to believe in that. But then, just as quickly, you saw the older women watching, eyes narrowing, calculating what that little act might mean. Was it kindness? Or was it the first move in another alliance? The scariest part is realizing you're being watched constantly. Not just by the emperor, not just by the empress, but by everyone. A cough in the wrong moment, a frown when someone else laughs, even the direction of your gaze during prayers. It all becomes fodder for whispers. The palace is basically one giant group chat where everything you do becomes a screenshot. By the time evening falls, you retreat to your chambers exhausted. Though you've barely spoken all day, the walls seem to hum with secrets, and you realize you're already part of the game whether you want to be or not. You lie back on your silk pillow, staring at the carved beams overhead, and sigh. Out there, people fight wars with swords and armor. In here, they fight with glances and fans. And honestly, you're not sure which battlefield is more terrifying. So you close your eyes, telling yourself you'll be careful tomorrow, more cautious with your words, more selective about whose invitations you accept. But deep down, you know the truth. Survival in this palace doesn't just mean staying invisible. It means learning how to play the game better than anyone else. And as you drift toward uneasy sleep, you can't help but mutter under your breath, I really should have just joined a pottery workshop instead. The next morning begins with an odd stillness. Even the sparrows perched along the carved eaves seem reluctant to chirp, as though they know what kind of day lies ahead. You feel it too, that tightening in your chest, the same way you'd brace yourself before stepping into a final exam without studying. Today isn't about whispered alliances or trading silken fans. It's about facing the Empress herself. You've seen her from a distance, of course. Always poised, always immaculate. Her robe's heavy with embroidery that probably weighs more than you do. She moves like a painting brought to life, slow and deliberate, as if time itself politely steps aside to let her pass. But seeing her and standing before her are two entirely different beasts. One is art, the other is survival. The summons arrives just after breakfast. A eunuch, expressionless as a porcelain doll, bows and informs you that Her Majesty requests your presence in the Hall of Benevolent Harmony. Your chopsticks nearly clatter to the floor. Requests is a polite word. No one says no to the Empress. The hall itself is infamous. Stories circulate of tears shed there, of smiles hiding punishments, of the Empress's voice echoing like thunder beneath its gilded beams. You smooth your robe 3 times before stepping inside, as though wrinkles might offend her. The hall is vast, every corner gleaming with gold, lacquer, and the faint, sharp tang of incense. The Empress sits elevated, a living mountain draped in dragon-stitched silk, her crown of phoenix hairpins glittering like shards of the sun. To her right and left, trusted attendants stand ready, silent as statues. When she looks at you, it feels less like a gaze and more like a ledger, your worth calculated in an instant. Come forward, she says. Her voice is calm, but it carries the weight of the entire dynasty. You walk toward her, each step echoing louder than the last. Your palms dampen despite the coolness of the air. She studies you for a long moment, and you're convinced she can read every nervous thought flickering through your skull. Finally, she speaks again, not with accusation but with measured curiosity. You are new to the palace. Tell me, what do you seek here? It's the kind of question that has no right answer. Honesty could be suicide. Too much flattery could look insincere. Too little disrespectful. You manage a bow, your voice steady only because you've practiced in your head 100 times. I seek only to serve your majesty. Her lips curve, though you can't tell if it's amusement or warning. That is what they all say. There's a ripple of tension around the room. like a string pulled too tight. You think of the stories you've heard. One concubine once dared to declare her loyalty outright to the emperor during such an audience, only for the empress to smile, nod, and later have her reassigned to a remote courtyard where she withered away in obscurity. Another, bolder still, tried to flatter the empress excessively, comparing her to heavenly goddesses. The empress thanked her graciously, then quietly made sure she never saw the emperor again. Historians still debate whether the empress acted out of jealousy or simply strategy, reminding everyone who truly governed within the walls. As you stand trembling, the empress shifts slightly, resting her chin on her hand. You have a talent, they say. Calligraphy. Relief washes over you like cool water. She hasn't asked about beauty or music, but something tangible, something that can't be twisted into open rivalry. You bow again, murmuring, "Yes, your majesty," though humble compared to the masters. She gestures, and a servant brings forward a scroll, brush, and ink. Your heart skips. A test. Right here, in front of the most powerful woman in the palace. You kneel, steadying your hand, and begin to write a verse you've memorized. A poem about spring rain nourishing hidden seeds. The brush glides, each stroke deliberate, the scent of ink sharp in your nostrils. You finish, bowing low as the scroll is lifted up to her. The empress examines it silently. Then she nods once, just once. But it's enough. You've passed for now. You will join the others in preparing scrolls for the temple festival, she declares. It's not an offer, it's a command. And just like that, you've been given a task that could either elevate you or expose you, depending on how well you execute it. When the audience ends, you leave the hall with trembling knees, but also with something unexpected. Relief. For the first time, you've seen the empress not just as a threat, but as a force of order. Her scrutiny is terrifying, yes, but it's also strangely reassuring. Chaos rules the concubine's quarters. The empress rules the empire's heart. Still, you're not naive. Behind her calm voice lies the sharp edge of power. You overhear later that one of the older concubines had made a careless remark about her robe, a joke about phoenixes fading with age. That concubine now spends her days embroidering alone in a far wing, her laughter no longer heard. The empress doesn't raise her voice, doesn't throw tantrums. She doesn't need to. Her punishments are silent but absolute. That night, as you sit by candlelight practicing your brushstrokes for the temple festival, you realize something unnerving. The emperor may be the sun, dazzling and unreachable, but the empress, she is the moon, calm, cool, and always present, ruling the tides of your life. And like the moon, she does not need to shine constantly to control the night. You dip your brush again, tracing strokes carefully, whispering under your breath, "Do not anger the moon," because here, behind the palace walls, it isn't always the emperor who decides your fate. Sometimes, survival depends on whether the empress allows you to keep playing the game at all. The palace gardens seem peaceful on the surface. The ponds shimmer with lotus blossoms, dragonflies hover lazily, and the sound of wind through bamboo almost tricks you into believing you've stumbled into paradise. But if you listen carefully, really carefully, you hear something else beneath the rustling leaves. It's the murmur of voices, the half-stifled laughter, the sound of ambition sharpened into whispers. This is where rivalries are born, nurtured, and sometimes fatally concluded. You quickly realize that the concubines aren't just women dressed in silk. They're players in a ceaseless game, each move calculated, each smile concealing a blade. You've heard that in chess, pawns may be sacrificed to protect the king. Well, here, pawns have their own agenda, and they're willing to shove each other straight off the board if it means one step closer to the emperor's glance. The first rivalry you notice is subtle. Two concubines strolling side by side, fans half raised, complimenting each other's hairpins. But then you catch it. The way one's eyes flick to the other's robes, the faint curl of a lip when she praises the simplicity of the design. In modern terms, it's like someone calling your brand new iPhone quaint. All sugar, no sincerity. You stand a little behind them, and though you're technically invisible, your heart beats as if you've stumbled into a minefield. Of course, rivalries don't stay subtle forever. One evening, during a moonlit banquet, a dancer twirls across the marble courtyard, her sleeves flowing like water. The emperor watches, smiling faintly, but your eyes are on the concubines. A certain favorite, whose name everyone knows but no one dares speak too loudly, leans forward just a little, letting her jeweled hairpin catch the lantern light. The emperor notices. His smile deepens, and just like that, the air shifts. The other women exchange looks sharp enough to cut Jade. You can practically hear the thought. She's gaining ground. She must be stopped. The tools of rivalry aren't always daggers or poisons, though those exist in the darker tales whispered at night. More often, the weapons are words, gifts, and carefully timed gestures. One concubine sends the emperor a robe embroidered with cranes, symbols of longevity. Another quickly arranges for a rare tea to be brought from the southern provinces. A third manages to accidentally stumble into his path near the library. Clutching a book of poetry she claims she was just returning. Coincidence? Please, even the bamboo groves know better. What makes it dangerous is that these gestures ripple outward. If the emperor smiles too long at someone's poem, the others feel compelled to retaliate. If he lingers over tea, suddenly every concubine develops an interest in brewing techniques. It's like a group project in school where everyone's trying to outshine each other, and you're the poor bystander stuck watching the chaos. Except here, the grading rubric could end with someone losing their privileges, their quarters, even their chance at survival. There's one incident that sticks in your mind. A concubine named Lady E had a voice so delicate it could melt frost. She sang during a private gathering, her melody filling the chamber like warm silk. The emperor was enchanted. Everyone could see it. The very next day, however, Lady E fell ill. Some say it was food poisoning. Others whisper her wine had been touched with a strange powder that made her voice crack permanently. Was it an accident? Or rivalry turned ruthless? Historians still debate the truth, but among the concubines, the message was clear. Rise too quickly, and someone will pull you down. You start noticing the small things, the way attendants trade knowing glances, how gifts arrive with suspicious timing, how even the emperor's fleeting frown can spark days of tension. You also learn something chilling. The rivalries don't always stay between the concubines. Families outside the palace, ambitious uncles, scheming cousins, fuel the fire. A well-placed rumor from outside can ruin a woman standing inside. Suddenly, you realize you're not just in a palace. You're in the center of a web, and every strand vibrates with someone's ambition. At night, lying in your chamber, you hear faint laughter drifting from distant courtyards. It isn't joyful. It's sharp, brittle, almost forced. You imagine the women behind those laughs, calculating their next move, replaying the emperor's every glance like analysts reviewing game footage. And you wonder, how long before you're forced into the rivalry yourself? For now, you try to stay quiet, to stay unnoticed. But even that is a strategy, and strategies don't always last. In this palace, neutrality is like standing still in a river. The current will eventually pull you into the fight whether you want it or not. And as you blow out your candle, you catch yourself whispering, "Stay invisible, stay invisible." But deep down, you already know. Behind these gilded walls, invisibility never lasts forever. By now, you've learned that the palace doesn't breathe like other places. It doesn't exhale fresh air, it exhales secrets. They curl through the corridors, seeping into tapestries, drifting beneath painted doors. If you stop moving for too long, you'll hear them, little scraps of sound. A cough meant to signal, a sandal scuffing twice to confirm, the flutter of silk at the wrong moment. Secrets here don't sit still. They move like living things, finding new hosts with every whisper. One of the first secrets you stumble upon isn't even spoken aloud. You see a servant girl carrying a tray of fruit, and tucked beneath the pomegranate is a scrap of cloth with a stitched pattern. 2 plum blossoms intertwined. You'd think it was decorative, but in this world, embroidery is a language. That little pattern is code, a promise of a meeting by the plum grove at dusk. And just like that, you understand. People here have turned ordinary objects into entire dictionaries of hidden meaning. It makes sense when you think about it. The concubines are watched constantly, by guards, by eunuchs, by each other. Words said too directly can destroy you. So silence itself becomes dangerous, and cleverness becomes survival. A falling petal placed on a certain page of a book, a hairpin turned slightly left instead of right, incense burned a few moments too long. Each is a sentence, a confession, a plea. You wonder if you should start carrying your own secret language kit like a spy with emojis, but silk fans instead of smartphones. There's an especially strange trick you hear about, mixing ground pearl into ink. To the naked eye, the letter looks like blank parchment. But when heated by a candle flame, the words appear, shimmering faintly like ghost writing. You imagine the tension of receiving such a note, holding it to the flame while praying it won't accidentally catch fire and announce your treason to the whole court. Even in its elegance, palace secrecy has an absurd edge, like the world's most stressful arts and crafts session. Of course, not all whispers are about love or longing. Some are about survival. The concubines quietly exchange information about which dishes are safe to eat, which physicians can be trusted, and which chambermaids have suddenly grown too curious. One rumor claims that a favored consort once tested her food by letting a stray cat lick it first. The poor animal survived, but barely, and the dish disappeared before reaching her lips. Historians still debate whether this story is true, but in the palace, its effect is real. Now you notice stray cats wandering close to the kitchens, strangely well-fed, as if they've been recruited into the emperor's security team. Secrets also carry dangers when they fall into the wrong ears. You overhear 2 eunuchs speaking softly, one saying, "It wasn't meant for her, it was meant for him." The other shushes him immediately. You lean in, but they vanish into the shadows before you can catch another word. It's like the palace itself enjoys tormenting you with half-told stories, dangling mysteries just beyond your grasp. You realize that here, incomplete knowledge is worse than ignorance. It gnaws at you, makes you restless, forces you to imagine the terrible possibilities filling the gaps. There's also the unsettling truth that some secrets are planted on purpose. A concubine might accidentally drop a scented sachet outside another's quarters, just so rumors will spread that the emperor visited her the night before. Another might forget a handkerchief embroidered with her family crest, ensuring whispers about outside alliances. These are decoys, little landmines of misinformation. You find yourself wondering how often what you've heard is truth or carefully cultivated illusion. One night, while the lanterns flicker low, you see a scene you'll never forget. A concubine kneels by a pond, tossing lotus petals into the water. At first, it looks poetic, almost melancholy. But then you notice, she's not tossing them randomly. She arranges them in groups, 2, then 3, then 2 again. It dawns on you, she's leaving a message. The eunuch nearby shifts slightly, and you realize he's the intended audience. He bows ever so faintly, then walks away. The petals drift apart on the surface, their secret erased by ripples, and you feel a chill. Secrets here don't just vanish. They dissolve back into the water, impossible to recover once gone. Sometimes you wonder how the emperor navigates this sea of hidden signals. Does he truly notice the plum blossoms in a fan's embroidery? Or does he leave the interpretation to his attendants? Is he the spider at the center of the web, or just another fly caught in the strands? Historians still debate how much emperors truly knew about the intrigues in their own palaces. Some argue they encouraged it, seeing rivalry as a tool of control. Others believe the emperors were often in the dark, their attention pulled elsewhere, leaving the women to spin their own dangerous games. As you drift through the corridors, every shadow feels heavier. You start checking behind tapestries, glancing over your shoulder, holding your breath when someone passes too close. You're not paranoid, you're simply learning the palace rhythm. In this world, what's whispered tonight could become tomorrow's scandal, and what's stitched into silk today could decide who survives the year. Lying in your chamber later, staring at the painted ceiling, you realize the cruel irony. The palace walls were built to keep secrets from getting out. Instead, they've turned into an echo chamber, amplifying every rumor until it vibrates in your bones. You close your eyes, half afraid of what you'll overhear tomorrow, and half afraid of what you won't. You wake to the sound of distant bells, soft and hollow, like the palace reminding you that another day has begun and the cycle continues. But today, as you wander the corridors, you can't help but notice the subtle pressure hanging in the air. The way eyes linger a second too long on one concubine's belly, or the way silk sleeves flutter over a woman's midsection as though hiding something precious. Here, children are not just children, their destiny wrapped in swaddling cloth. The truth hits you with a thud. In this palace, the worth of a concubine often comes down to her ability to bear sons. Not just babies, sons, heirs, future emperors. You can almost hear the cruel math ticking in the background. No child, no influence. A daughter, maybe some sympathy. But a son? That's a ticket to survival, maybe even glory. It's like the world's most brutal lottery, with wombs as the playing cards. You watch as one concubine, her hands resting lightly on her stomach, walks differently, carefully, reverently, as though every step could break the fragile thread of her importance. Servants swarm around her, suddenly attentive, bowing lower, speaking softer. Even eunuchs seem to clear paths for her with exaggerated politeness. You realize it's not her they respect, but the life inside her, the potential imperial blood. If she carries a boy, her future is transformed. If she miscarries, she'll vanish into irrelevance faster than candle smoke. Sounds heartless, but that's how the system is built. One disturbing fact you uncover: some concubines deliberately starve themselves of certain foods in the belief that it would increase their chances of conceiving a boy. Others clutched jade amulets, wore specific herbs in sachets, or even slept facing particular directions because astrologers said it improved the odds. Some historians still debate whether these rituals had cultural value beyond superstition, but you realize they reveal something else. Desperation doesn't need proof, it needs hope. And then there are the darker whispers. A favored concubine suddenly loses her pregnancy after sipping a medicinal broth gifted from another chamber. A new girl faints at a banquet, only to wake and discover she's no longer expecting. These tragedies might be accidents or sabotage. Nobody says it aloud, but the silence is more terrifying than words. You can almost hear the unspoken thought. Children aren't just born in this palace. They're fought for, guarded, and sometimes stolen before they even draw breath. One legend that sticks with you tells of a concubine who disguised the birth of a daughter as a stillbirth, only to secretly raise her in the servants' quarters until the child was older. Some historians doubt the story, but others point to records of suspiciously missing names in palace registries. The idea haunts you. In a place where survival is already fragile, imagine the courage or recklessness of trying to protect life from the palace itself. Not all of this is tragedy, though. There's a strange comedy in how overprepared some expectant mothers became. One consort insisted on sitting only on cushions stuffed with crane feathers because a monk once told her it guaranteed divine favor. Another demanded her chamber be painted in only one color, claiming that mixing pigments would confuse the unborn child's spirit. You can't help but smirk. In modern terms, it's like the world's most intense baby shower crossed with a superstition Olympics. Still, you can feel the weight crushing these women. Every glance, every sideways whisper, every physician's visit is tinged with judgment. It's not just their bodies on the line. It's their reputations, their families' futures, their very existence in the palace hierarchy. You think back to all the embroidered codes and whispered secrets you've learned about, and now you realize the most powerful secret of all is the slow swelling of a belly hidden beneath folds of brocade until the right moment. One night, as you pass a courtyard, you hear a soft lullaby carried on the breeze. You follow the sound and see a nursemaid rocking a child wrapped in silk, the baby's tiny face just visible in the lantern glow. For a moment, everything feels tender, almost normal. But then you remember, this isn't just someone's child. This is a chess piece in a game far larger than any lullaby. The lull of the song only makes the truth sting sharper. Innocence doesn't last long behind palace walls. You retreat, the sound fading behind you, and realize with a shiver that the weight these women carry isn't just physical. It's political, it's survival. And whether that survival rests in the arms of a child or disappears with a miscarriage is a gamble none of them can truly control. You can't help but think, if you lived here, you'd probably break under that pressure in a week. Maybe less. The corridors seem quieter now, as though the palace itself is holding its breath. And then you notice her, the woman at the very center of it all. She isn't necessarily the most beautiful in the court, but there's something undeniable about her presence. The others lower their eyes when she enters. Servants bow so deeply it almost looks like they might topple over. This is the Empress, the axis around which the entire web of the harem spins. You quickly realize she's not just a figurehead with pretty robes. She's the manager of an empire within an empire. Every appointment of a maid, every distribution of silk or food rations, every seemingly trivial decision about who gets which chamber. All of it has her signature somewhere in the background. If the emperor is the sun, the empress is the moon. Sometimes gentle and glowing, sometimes hidden, but always exerting her pull on the tides of palace life. The truth is, she's expected to be more than just wife and mother. She is meant to embody Confucian ideals of balance and harmony, a kind of living instruction manual for how women should behave. But as you watch her navigate the court, you see that beneath the layers of ceremony, she is also strategist, judge, and, at times, executioner. Her smile can be a blessing, her raised eyebrow a sentence. It's like she's the ultimate HR manager, except instead of bad emails, the punishment for stepping out of line could be exile or worse. One strange detail strikes you. Empresses often had their own private seal, which could authorize palace orders without the emperor's immediate approval. Imagine that, an imperial rubber stamp, but one that could change destinies with a single press. Historians still debate the extent of her real power. Was she truly autonomous, or always at the mercy of the emperor's shifting moods? The answer, you suspect, lies somewhere in between. Power here is like incense smoke. It curls, drifts, and reshapes, but it always leaves a trace. You see how the empress balances on a knife's edge. If she is too kind, concubines may overstep. If she is too harsh, She risks alienating the emperor or sparking rebellion in the ranks. And then there's the delicate matter of heirs. The empress may not always be the birth mother of the crown prince. Sometimes she adopts the children of concubines, raising them as her own. It's a political move, but also an emotional gamble. Imagine being a woman asked to mother a child who might have been the product of your rival's most intimate victory. You'd need the patience of a saint or the acting skills of an Oscar winner. The palace whispers are sharpest around her. Some say one empress secretly fed her rivals food laced with herbs that quietly reduced fertility. Others tell of empresses who protected the very women they should have despised, sheltering concubines from jealous plots or shielding their children from intrigue. You realize that her role is impossible to define in simple terms. She's villain and savior, mother and executioner, leader and prisoner, all wrapped up in silk. There's a story that stays with you. An empress who, after the death of her son, continued to care for the other princes as though they were her own. Some believed it was duty, others whispered it was strategy, but the children grew up calling her mother nonetheless. That detail feels strangely human. Like in a place built on cold calculation, tenderness sometimes snuck through the cracks. And then there's the theater of her daily life. Picture it. Her grand procession through the halls, attendants trailing behind like a living train of silk, the fragrance of rare incense marking her presence before she even arrives. Every gesture she makes is symbolic. Even the way she raises her teacup is a kind of choreography. You get the sense that if TikTok had existed back then, the empress would have been the undisputed queen of how to hold a cup gracefully tutorials. Still, despite all the splendor, you feel the isolation that hangs around her. For all her authority, she is just as trapped by these walls as any other woman. Perhaps even more so. When a concubine falls out of favor, she may fade into obscurity. But the empress, she must remain on stage, playing her part, endlessly scrutinized. You imagine her late at night, when the lanterns dim, staring at her reflection in polished bronze, wondering if the power she wields is truly hers, or just a costume the palace forces her to wear. As you drift through her world, you can't escape the uneasy thought. The empress embodies both the best and worst of palace life. She's revered, yet vulnerable, powerful, yet caged. In her, you see the paradox of the forbidden city itself, a fortress of control that hides 1,000 fragile secrets. You feel it before you see it, the tension like static in the air. The palace looks calm enough from a distance. Lanterns glowing, silk slippers gliding along polished floors, women bowing politely. But step closer, and you catch the flickers of sharp glances, the whispers that dissolve into silence when you appear. Here, conflict isn't usually a loud argument. It's quieter, more dangerous, a series of ripples beneath the surface that eventually turn into storms. You notice how fragile harmony really is. A misplaced word from one concubine to the emperor might mean another woman doesn't see him for weeks. A silk robe that arrives accidentally stained with oil could ruin an appearance at a banquet. Even the subtle arrangement of seats at a tea gathering has meaning. 1 inch closer to the emperor is the difference between being visible and being invisible. It's like living in an endless reality TV show, except there are no confessionals where you get to vent, and the losers don't just get sent home, they can be erased. A particularly odd detail strikes you. Women sometimes relied on eunuchs to carry their messages, spread their rumors, or sabotage rivals. Eunuchs were both invisible and indispensable, moving silently through corridors where others could not. You imagine them as the palace's version of group chats, except far more dangerous. If you wanted gossip delivered with a twist of poison, a eunuch was your best bet. Historians still debate how much real power these go-betweens held, but you can't shake the sense that many women owed their rise or their ruin to whispered words carried in the dead of night. And the conflicts aren't just about jealousy. They're political, too. If one concubine's family had influence at court, she might act like a spy for her clan, gathering secrets from pillow talk and feeding them back outside the walls. Another concubine, tied to a rival faction, might be seen as a threat just by existing. You realize these women were pawns and players at the same time, moving in games larger than themselves. Some clashes never made it to the surface but still scarred lives. There are tales of poisoned cosmetics, face powders laced with substances that, over time, would ruin the skin. Imagine reaching for your favorite foundation only to find it doubles as slow-acting revenge. You can almost hear a modern influencer sighing, "That's not cruelty-free." And then there were the more visible conflicts, when disputes reached the emperor's ears. A concubine might accuse another of slander, or worse, of plotting harm against an imperial heir. The emperor, depending on his temperament, might investigate, or might let the empress handle it. Punishments ranged from demotion to house arrest to a quiet disappearance. Palace annals record these outcomes with chilling neutrality. She was removed from her post, as if that didn't mean a whole life was just extinguished. Still, not every conflict ended in disaster. Sometimes alliances formed. Two lower-ranked concubines, realizing they'd never outshine the favorites alone, might band together, protecting each other from slander and sharing tiny joys in a hostile environment. These bonds were fragile, yes, but they were also a kind of resistance. A laugh shared in the garden, a secret gift of embroidery. It was enough to keep loneliness at bay, if only for a little while. You can't help but wonder how exhausting it must have been to live like this, always on guard, always calculating. Imagine trying to fall asleep when you're not sure if tomorrow your rival will spread a rumor that you've insulted the empress. It's less like living in a palace and more like being trapped in a chess game where every piece wants to checkmate you. The irony, of course, is that the emperor probably never noticed half of this. From his point of view, he just saw a rotation of smiles, bows, and carefully curated charm. But behind that curtain, each of those women was fighting a war, silent, relentless, and often invisible. Historians still argue whether these conflicts truly shaped dynasties or if they were just personal dramas magnified by gossip. But as you listen to the whispers curling around these halls, you're pretty sure they mattered. And so, you keep walking, the echo of footsteps following you down a darkened corridor. Somewhere in the distance, two women are laughing together. Maybe genuine, maybe not. You can't tell. Here, every laugh, every glance, every whispered word could be the opening move in another hidden battle. And you realize with a shiver, survival in the palace doesn't depend on beauty alone. It depends on mastering the art of invisible war. You pause at the edge of a courtyard, and suddenly the atmosphere shifts again. Here, in the palace, power isn't only built through charm or alliances. It's reinforced through punishment. Mercy and cruelty walk hand in hand, and you never quite know which one will greet you in the morning. You hear the rustle of chains being carried by eunuchs down a hall. Punishment can come swiftly, without warning. A concubine accused of stepping out of line might find herself stripped of her rank, her silks exchanged for rough plain cloth, her quarters moved from the warm inner chambers to a damp, forgotten annex at the edge of the palace. It's like getting downgraded from a luxury hotel suite to the worst dorm room imaginable, except the downgrade here isn't temporary. It's usually forever. But the palace had an arsenal of punishments beyond exile within walls. Some were public, designed to humiliate. Imagine being forced to kneel in the freezing courtyard for hours while everyone else pretends not to notice you. Other punishments were quieter. A loss of attendance, smaller meals, removal of the special cosmetics and fabrics that made a concubine feel like more than just another face in the crowd. In a world where appearances were survival, these small cuts were devastating. The empress often stood as judge. Sometimes she was lenient, extending mercy to concubines who had made mistakes in rituals or spoken out of turn. Other times she was ruthless. Historical records note Empress Wu, long before she seized the throne for herself, could punish rivals with almost surgical precision, removing them from the emperor's sight so thoroughly it was as if they had never existed. Historians still debate whether she acted from necessity or cruelty, but in the palace, the difference hardly mattered. Stranger punishments also appear in old accounts. One story tells of a concubine who loved to gossip too freely. Rather than exile her outright, she was forced to eat her meals in silence for months, forbidden from speaking unless spoken to. Imagine being a social media influencer suddenly banned from posting. You'd wither under the weight of your own irrelevance. The punishment worked. When she returned to the social circles of the palace, she spoke less, laughed less, and never quite regained her old brightness. Yet mercy was just as calculated. An emperor might pardon a concubine not because he forgave her mistake, but because showing leniency demonstrated his benevolence to the court. A concubine who wept beautifully, or one whose family had strategic value, might receive a second chance. Sometimes mercy was even a weapon. Sparing someone could place them forever in your debt, turning a former rival into an unwilling ally. You notice how fear and relief coexist in every woman you pass. They smile when granted favor, but in their eyes you see the shadow of memory, what it feels like to kneel on frozen stone, or to hear the scrape of a bolt sliding shut on a door that will not reopen. The palace had no shortage of ghosts, not the supernatural kind, but the living ones. Women who lingered in forgotten wings, stripped of titles, waiting for time to erase them. One chilling truth sinks in. The emperor himself rarely lifted a hand in punishment. His silence was enough. A single frown from him could unleash a cascade of consequences carried out by the empress, eunuchs, or ministers. To be ignored by him was sometimes worse than being scolded. Indifference was the sharpest blade. But mercy could be breathtaking, too. In the annals of the Han Dynasty, there's a story of a concubine who accidentally broke a palace ritual object during a ceremony, something that could have ruined her forever. The emperor, instead of punishing her, laughed and said, "If even jade can shatter, how can a person be expected never to err?" That line became famous, repeated by scholars for centuries. Historians still debate whether it was genuine affection or clever image management, but for the woman at the center of it, it was salvation. You realize punishment and mercy weren't just tools of control. They were performances woven into the theater of palace life. Each act reminded concubines of their fragility, kept them orbiting tightly around the emperor's favor. You feel the weight of it pressing against you, as if the walls themselves are whispering. One misstep, and you, too, could be erased. So you keep walking, your steps softer now, more cautious. Behind you, a door shuts with a hollow thud, echoing longer than it should. You don't know who just vanished into that silence. But you do know this. In the palace, mercy is never free, and punishment is never far. You step into a quieter wing of the palace, where the air smells faintly of milk and herbal tonics instead of incense and powder. This is where the stakes change, where beauty and charm give way to something far more decisive: motherhood. You quickly learn that within these walls, bearing a son is like holding the ultimate golden ticket. One child can elevate a concubine from obscurity to near immortality, transforming her quarters from cramped shadows to sunlit halls. Without children, even the most beautiful woman might eventually fade into silence, her laughter remembered only by a few handmaidens. With a son, though, she becomes untouchable, a living extension of the dynasty's future. But the path to motherhood in the palace is anything but tender. Every pregnancy is surrounded by whispers, suspicion, and invisible daggers. The empress, officially mother of the empire whether or not she bore sons herself, often viewed new pregnancies with wary eyes. Eunuchs carefully documented every stage, every craving, every morning sickness. Herbalists prepared tonics not just to strengthen the mother, but sometimes, if rivalries ran deep, to weaken her. Stories circulate of miscarriages that were perhaps not accidents, of herbal prescriptions that soothed on the surface while sabotaging within. You hear the soft cry of an infant in the distance. That sound, delicate as it is, can rearrange the balance of power overnight. A newborn son doesn't just belong to his mother, he belongs to the dynasty, the emperor, the ancestors, and that's when the struggle begins. A concubine might cradle her baby with all the warmth of a mother, but deep down she knows. Others are waiting for a chance to seize him, to raise him as their own, to rewrite history by controlling his future. In some dynasties, newborn sons were immediately taken from their mothers and raised in the empress's quarters. The official reason? To ensure unity, to symbolize that all heirs were children of the empire. The unofficial reason? Control. It was easier to prevent ambitious concubines from using their sons as political leverage if those boys never truly lived under their roofs. Imagine pouring your soul into 9 months of fragile hope only to have your child whisked away, his first words spoken in another woman's presence. But sometimes mothers manage to hold on. Consort Ban of the Han Dynasty, for example, was admired for refusing to exploit her son's status for personal gain. Instead, she emphasized ritual and duty, setting herself apart as virtuous. Historians still argue whether she was genuinely selfless or simply playing the long game, but the effect was undeniable. Her reputation remained untarnished even when others around her fell. Still, for every story of dignity, there are darker tales. Concubines who bore sons often became targets. Rumors of poisonings in the nurseries, of food tasters for infants, of suspicious fevers that struck at just the wrong moment. They weave a chilling thread through the history of the palace. Even cradles could become battlegrounds. And daughters? They mattered too, though differently. Daughters often strengthened bonds with noble families when married off, weaving alliances beyond the palace walls. Some concubines found deep pride in their daughters, carving small but lasting legacies through those marriages. But daughters rarely protected their mothers from palace rivalries the way sons could. In a place where lineage meant survival, mothers of daughters often still lived with one foot in uncertainty. You can't help but notice how distorted motherhood becomes in this environment. Outside these walls, mothers soothe, protect, nurture. Inside, motherhood is also calculation. Who gets to visit the emperor more often during pregnancy? Who secures the most skilled midwives? Who ensures the child's name is inscribed in the proper ancestral records? Even lullabies carry the weight of ambition here. And yet, under the candlelight, you see moments of something heartbreakingly human. A mother humming softly, her hand tracing the curve of her infant's cheek, knowing full well she might not be allowed to raise him for long. A eunuch bowing stiffly as he takes the baby away, and the mother watching, her eyes empty but her body trembling. In those fleeting seconds, palace politics dissolve, and you glimpse the universal truth. A mother's love is the one thing even the Forbidden City can't completely erase. But the palace has its own logic. Here, motherhood is not just about love. It is about survival, legacy, and the chance to carve one's name into the chronicles of dynasties. And as you move further into these halls, you feel it. Every cooing infant, every whispered lullaby, every bitter rivalry. Each one is a gamble, a chance at power wrapped in swaddling cloth. The candle flickers low, and you realize something unsettling. Your heartbeat has synced with the rhythm of those tiny cries echoing through the palace. Hope and fear, rising and falling, always entwined. You wake the next morning to the sound of gongs echoing faintly across the courtyards, their metallic hum dragging you from uneasy dreams. Here, mornings don't belong to you. They belong to the palace clock. Every single concubine, whether beloved or forgotten, is caught in this rhythm. You shuffle into robes that feel too heavy for this early hour, embroidered silk that whispers status even when you feel half asleep. The day starts with rituals. You bow, you rise, you bow again. The empress may preside over the morning audience in her own quarters, the younger concubines lining up to offer formal greetings. It's a spectacle of hierarchy disguised as courtesy, every gesture calibrated like a tick-tock loop, repeated, rehearsed, and never-ending. You feel the strain in your knees, but you dare not complain. In the palace, even your posture is a political statement. After greetings comes the slow crawl of routine. Meals arrive on silver platters, arranged like works of art. Steamed dumplings shaped into flowers, soups so clear they shimmer like mirrors. And yet, you know better than to eat too greedily. Every bite might be tasted first by eunuchs, and every dish could carry silent messages. To eat sparingly is safer, though you can't help but eye the desserts with longing. Somewhere out there, commoners are biting into hot street buns dripping with oil and freedom. You're stuck with immaculate, perfectly portioned plates. The strangest part is the sheer weight of boredom. From the outside, people imagine palace life as glittering spectacles. Banquets, music, golden robes. But the truth? Most of the day is waiting. You sit, embroidering endless patterns that blur into one another, or strumming zither while your mind drifts. Some women paint, others recite poetry. Many just nap through the long afternoons. The palace hums with stillness, punctuated only by the occasional shuffle of eunuchs or the sudden arrival of a message. That boredom, though, is dangerous. It breeds whispers. You lean closer to hear a fellow concubine's tale about who was summoned last night, who seemed pale at breakfast, who coughed just a little too much during greetings. Gossip fills the silence like water seeping through cracks. It's not just entertainment, it's survival. Knowing whose favor is rising or falling could mean the difference between safety and disaster. And yet, sometimes the palace tries to spice things up. You may be summoned to participate in rituals, seasonal festivals, poetry contests, or elaborate ceremonies where everyone's robes glitter in candlelight. There's music, yes, but the air feels stiff, like everyone is waiting for someone else to slip up. Even during these rare diversions, you realize it's not about joy, it's about display. Harmony must be performed, whether it's real or not. At night, the suspense begins again. Which of you will be chosen to visit the emperor? Eunuchs arrive with their inscrutable expressions, calling out names like lottery numbers. Some concubines light extra incense. Others bribe eunuchs for information. A few resign themselves to never hearing their names again. And while many dream of being chosen, others secretly dread it. Because with the emperor's gaze comes scrutiny, envy, and sometimes peril. What lingers most is the sound of nothingness. Hours stretch into days, days into seasons, marked only by the slow turn of the palace gardens. Flowers bloom and fall, snow melts into puddles, cicadas sing, and still the routines repeat. It's a strange paradox. A place designed to be the beating heart of an empire, yet for many women inside, life moves like molasses. You find yourself staring at a single candle, its flame flickering against lacquered walls. That little flame feels freer than you, can dance, bend, vanish. You must sit, smile, and wait. In the palace, waiting isn't just a state of being. It's a test, one that can last a lifetime. And so your days blur, embroidered with silken threads of duty and stitched with hours of silence. A gilded cage doesn't need chains when boredom itself is the lock. The palace may look quiet, almost serene under the sweep of golden rooftops, but if you lean in, really lean in, you'll catch the pulse beneath it all, the endless hum of intrigue. No day passes without whispers slipping through these courtyards, like smoke curling under doors. For every silent bow you give at morning greetings, there's an equally loud rumor fluttering from lip to ear, growing teeth with each retelling. You hear one eunuch mutter that a high-ranked concubine faked an illness to avoid being summoned, her pale complexion painted on with powdered rice. Another claims someone was caught sneaking poetry verses out of the palace, secret lines meant for a family member who hadn't been heard from in years. And then there are the spicier tales, the kind passed in low voices after lamps are blown out. A jade hairpin left in the wrong chamber, a mysterious cup of tea that went untouched, a scarf embroidered with words too intimate to be just decorative. Rumors here aren't idle entertainment. They're weapons, daggers wrapped in silk. One careless sentence can travel faster than fire through dry grass. Before you know it, a rival's reputation is scorched, her smile strained, her place in the emperor's thoughts shaken. You learn quickly that gossip isn't simply noise. It's currency, a currency more valuable than jade or pearls. And sometimes, the palace itself seems to breathe life into these stories. Remember that small pavilion in the North Garden, the one with carved railings that creak just enough under a person's weight? That pavilion has heard more secrets than most ministers in the outer court. Or the echoing corridor where footsteps carry too far. Stand there long enough and you'll pick up names being whispered in rooms you'll never be invited into. The architecture itself conspires in this web of intrigue, funneling voices through spaces designed to impress but equally skilled at betraying. The strangest thing? Some rumors live longer than the people who birthed them. Take, for example, the tale of consort Mei from the Tang dynasty. Historians still debate whether she was executed on the empress's orders, or if her death was an accident cloaked in courtly silence. Or the infamous fragrant concubine during the Qing, supposedly perfumed by nature, whose story blurred into myth with each retelling. These women's lives are remembered less for their reality and more for the stories spun about them, stories that outlasted marble halls and dynastic thrones. And you feel the pull. Part of you leans closer, wanting to know every scrap of rumor. Who might be falling, who might be rising, what secret alliances are forming behind screens painted with peonies. Yet another part of you recoils, sensing the danger. Because if you listen too closely, if you repeat what you shouldn't, you might one day find your own name carried along in the current, reshaped and twisted until you're unrecognizable. At night, lying beneath silk quilts, you hear voices drifting like moths beyond your curtains. A laugh, a murmur, a sigh. Was it about you? You don't know. That's the real cruelty. Not the rumor itself, but the uncertainty it plants, the way it keeps you turning over possibilities until sleep refuses to come. And as you drift in and out of restless dreams, you realize the truth. In the palace, walls don't need ears. People do the job just fine. The whispers don't stay whispers forever. Eventually, they bloom into rivalries sharp enough to cut silk. You feel it first in the air, like static before a storm. A concubine greets you with a smile just a touch too wide, her words dripping with honey, but her eyes scanning you like a merchant weighing goods. Another accidentally brushes past you in the corridor, her jeweled sleeve grazing yours a fraction too hard, just enough to remind you she holds more weight in this gilded hierarchy. This is where palace life reveals its truest game. Rivalries among consorts are not loud. They don't look like screaming matches or pulled hair. No, that would be too simple, too honest. Instead, it's the art of subtle sabotage. One woman arranges for a beloved piece of jewelry to disappear, only for it to turn up days later in another's chamber. Another spreads whispers about a rival's cough, hinting, innocently of course, that she might be carrying something contagious. Suddenly, that rival finds herself alone at meals, her seat a small island at the edge of the table. And then there are the performances. Every time the emperor appears, it becomes a stage. One consort might recite poetry so delicate it makes even seasoned ministers dab at their eyes. Another could appear with flawless hair and robes that shimmer like sunrise on water, each stitch carefully chosen to say, "Look at me, not her." And you sit straighter, adjust your sleeves, and try not to blink too much, because even blinking at the wrong time might be read as weakness. Some rivalries become legendary. The Empress Wu of the Tang dynasty once started as a concubine, navigating rivalries so intense they make your modern office politics look like playground squabbles. Rumor has it she managed not just to outwit rivals, but to rise higher than anyone thought possible. Historians still argue about whether she was a genius strategist or simply ruthless beyond measure. But either way, her path began in chambers just like yours, in rivalries not so different from the ones you see simmering now. And let's be honest, sometimes the rivalries are almost entertaining, like watching a reality show without subtitles. You see two concubines competing over who can serve the emperor tea with more grace, their hands trembling from the pressure, porcelain cups nearly tipping. Or the time one accidentally tripped during a court performance, her rival's smirk vanishing when the stumble won sympathy instead of ridicule. It's petty, it's cruel, it's oddly human. But beneath the performances and poisoned smiles lies something more dangerous: alliances. Some women form quiet partnerships, promising to watch each other's backs in the labyrinth of intrigue. Yet trust here is fragile. An ally today might be a rival tomorrow, her loyalty sold for a chance at greater favor. And you, walking these polished stone floors, never know which smile is sincere and which hides the glint of a knife. What chills you most isn't the scheming, though. It's the patience. These rivalries aren't rushed. They simmer for months, even years. A slight today might blossom into revenge seasons later. The palace teaches you that time is the sharpest weapon of all, and every woman here has learned how to wield it. As you settle into your chamber that night, the silk curtains drawn against the cold, you realize survival here isn't about beauty or talent. It's about learning when to bow, when to smile, when to hold your tongue, and when to strike. Rivalries aren't distractions. They are the very rhythm of palace life. And whether you join the dance or not, you're already part of it. Everything, all the whispers, the silk traps, the silent rivalries, comes down to one thing: the emperor's favor. It is the sun around which every planet in this palace orbits. Without its light, you fade into shadows, your jewels gathering dust, your voice shrinking into irrelevance. With it, though, you glow so brightly that others burn in your wake. And favor isn't always about love. That's the first hard lesson you learn. It's not some fairy tale where the emperor gazes into your eyes and the world dissolves. No, favor is politics wrapped in silk robes. When the emperor notices you, he isn't just noticing you. He's also signaling to ministers, to families, to entire clans beyond these walls. A lifted eyebrow here, a shared laugh there. These are not gestures of romance. They're chess moves. And you're a piece on the board, though sometimes, if you play your role well, you can nudge the hand that moves you. But don't think for a second that gaining favor is simple. The rituals are exhausting. Imagine preparing for hours just to walk across a hall. Your hair twisted into elaborate knots, your face powdered to perfection, your robes layered until they're heavier than a toddler clinging to your shoulders. And still, the most important part isn't what you wear, but how you carry it. You must glide, not stumble. You must smile, not beam. You must speak, but only when the silence invites you. One false move and the opportunity vanishes. The emperor might glance away, distracted by another woman's song or by news from the borderlands. In that instant, your night of preparation dissolves like sugar in tea. You retreat, smiling politely, while your insides churn like storm clouds. Favor is fickle. Sometimes it arrives without effort. A cough escapes your lips at just the right time, and suddenly the emperor asks if you're well, his concern elevating you above rivals who've practiced poetry all week. Other times, you can pour every drop of energy into impressing him, only to find he's preoccupied with a chessboard, his mind already marching troops hundreds of miles away. Historians still debate how much personal preference versus political strategy guided an emperor's choices. Some records suggest emperors followed strict rotation systems to avoid favoritism. Others hint at fiery attachments that defied the rules. The truth, as always, is probably both. And with every flicker of attention, the court responds like ripples in a pond. If the emperor smiles at you tonight, tomorrow the eunuchs bow deeper, the cooks prepare your favorite dish, and the seamstresses mysteriously find a bolt of fabric meant for you. But if his gaze skips past you, even once, the ripples shift. The bows stiffen, the dishes turn bland, and the fabric somehow disappears into another woman's wardrobe. It's exhausting, like running a marathon where the track keeps moving, or auditioning endlessly for a role that might never truly be yours. And yet, you chase it because in this palace, favor is life. Without it, you're little more than an ornament gathering dust in a gilded cage. At night, when the candles burn low, you wonder, does the emperor ever sense this theater? Does he realize every smile he gives, every hand he brushes, shapes the destiny of women locked in these halls? Or does he simply enjoy the attention, sipping it like warm wine? You don't know. No one does. But you do know this. Tomorrow, when you rise, you'll dress carefully, practice your composure, and step once again into the dance. Because here, the emperor's favor isn't just something to desire. It's the only thing standing between your survival and your erasure. Morning begins not with a gentle sunrise, but with footsteps. The scrape of slippers outside your chamber is the palace's alarm clock, and it never fails. Before you've even opened your eyes, attendants are bustling in, drawing curtains, straightening pillows, and announcing that the day has officially begun. As though you weren't already awake, heart pounding, dreading the endless rhythm that lies ahead. Your first task is washing. Buckets of water hauled from deep wells arrive, steaming in winter, lukewarm in summer. Attendants help you rinse your face with cloths scented faintly of chrysanthemum, though the smell sometimes mixes awkwardly with the mineral tang of the water itself. You're expected to look refreshed, radiant, and calm. Never mind that you barely slept because the concubine 2 rooms away practiced her lute until midnight. Then comes the dressing ritual. Robes are chosen not by whim, but by rules older than you are. Colors shift with the seasons. Fabrics are matched to rank. Embroidery must follow patterns approved by the empress. You stand still while layer after layer weighs you down, the silk whispering across your skin, the stiff collars brushing against your jaw. Somewhere in the back of your mind you wonder if anyone has ever calculated how many hours of a concubine's life are spent just being dressed by other people. Probably enough to equal a college degree. After dressing, you eat, but even that is ritualized. Bowls of rice, small plates of vegetables, pickled delicacies, all arranged in symmetrical perfection. You're not allowed to eat greedily. Each bite must be measured, each chew composed. If you're feeling particularly rebellious, you might sneak an extra slice of melon, but heaven forbid anyone catches you enjoying yourself too much. Food here is nourishment and performance at once. The rest of the day flows in strict channels. There are set times to attend the empress, set times for study or embroidery, even set times to walk in the gardens. And yes, even your leisure has rules. Imagine being told exactly how long you're allowed to enjoy the scent of plum blossoms, or which path you may or may not wander. It's like living in a theme park where every ride has a 2-minute cap and someone with a clipboard is watching. One of the strangest details? Palace women were sometimes inspected for health like prized horses. Officials would track menstrual cycles, record pregnancies, and monitor signs of illness. There's even mention in certain records of palace doctors tasked with confirming whether a consort was still fertile. Historians still debate just how invasive these practices were, but the implication alone is enough to make you shiver. Privacy here isn't just scarce, it's non-existent. The sounds of these rituals are just as telling. The soft thump of silk shoes on polished floors, the constant murmur of attendants, the scrape of jade chopsticks against porcelain. Sometimes you hear the clang of gongs signaling different hours, echoing through the courtyards like an omnipresent reminder that time here belongs to the palace, not to you. Even silence is structured. Pauses in conversation stretch deliberately, waiting for the right-ranked person to break them. By midday, your body aches from sitting perfectly straight during lessons in calligraphy or etiquette. The brush in your hand leaves streaks of black across the rice paper, the smell of ink sharp and cloying. You imagine, just for a second, scrawling something outrageous. Maybe a doodle of a cat knocking over an inkpot, before you remember that humor isn't part of the curriculum. Evenings repeat the cycle. More rituals, more inspections, more bows. When night finally comes, and you retreat to your chamber, there's a fleeting sense of freedom. You breathe in the faint cedar smoke of the incense. You let the heavy robe slip off your shoulders, and for one heartbeat, you are just yourself. No rank, no performance, no ritual. Just you. But the moment never lasts. The palace bell rings again, reminding you that tomorrow, it all begins anew. And so the days blur together, each one polished, choreographed, and draining. You find yourself missing small freedoms you once took for granted, like sleeping in late, laughing too loudly, or chewing food without worrying about posture. In here, even your smallest movements are measured, weighed, and recorded. The palace demands not just your presence, but your very rhythm of existence. Behind the closed doors of the palace, when the lanterns are dimmed and the corridors grow quiet, a different world breathes into being. You'd expect only solitude here, endless silence broken by the rustle of silk, but that's only the surface. The truth is, life behind those carved screens is full of whispers, stolen moments, and small rebellions that never make it into official histories. You sit with a handful of other concubines, the ones who haven't decided to see you as competition today. Together, you sew embroidery not because you want to, but because it passes the time. Threads weave into peonies and cranes, but sometimes mischievous hands slip in little jokes. A crooked petal, a hidden character stitched where no inspector would notice. One woman leans close and murmurs a poem she's been composing, words that would never survive beyond these walls. You laugh softly, careful not to be overheard. It feels like sharing secrets in middle school, except instead of teachers, you've got the empress and an army of eunuchs to worry about. These friendships are delicate. They bloom quickly in the shared loneliness, but can wither just as fast if jealousy takes root. Still, when you whisper together under lamplight, you almost believe you're just ordinary women, talking about dreams of food you miss, like steaming dumplings from a street vendor, or about brothers and sisters you haven't seen in years. One odd fact: some concubines secretly kept diaries, scratching thoughts on scraps of silk or bamboo slips. Historians still debate whether these fragments are authentic, but the possibility feels comforting, that even in isolation, women found ways to leave a trace of themselves. But not all secrets are so innocent. Every palace generation seems to carry rumors of forbidden romances, of concubines who looked not toward the emperor but toward someone else. A visiting official's fleeting glance, a eunuch trusted too much, even another woman's smile held too long. Most of these tales are cloaked in exaggeration, stretched like sticky rice, but there's always a kernel of truth. One notorious story tells of a concubine caught exchanging letters with a guard. No one knows for sure if the guard was executed, but the woman's name quietly vanished from palace records, as though she'd never existed. The danger, of course, is enormous. Even a rumor of improper affection could destroy you, and yet, the human heart doesn't bow to regulations. Some women risked everything for the thrill of a secret touch, a word meant only for them. When you imagine that, lying awake on your lacquered bed, you understand. In a world where every movement is watched, even the smallest forbidden gesture could feel like freedom itself. Then there are the hobbies, tiny escapes disguised as duty. A few women carved miniature figurines from peach pits, passing them like talismans. Others hid painted fans inside closets, their colors too bright and bold to be considered proper. One concubine even kept a pet cricket in a bamboo cage, the sound of its chirp like a reminder that life existed outside gilded walls. It's a little absurd. Surrounded by treasures of jade and gold, you'd give anything just to keep a noisy insect for company. When you're alone, you invent your own rebellions. Maybe you linger a few minutes longer in the bath, letting the steam fog up your mirrors. Maybe you sneak an extra dumpling from the tray, or you hum a tune that hasn't been sanctioned by etiquette masters. These are minuscule acts, hardly revolutionary, but within the palace, they feel enormous. They're proof that you are still yourself, that the walls haven't yet swallowed you whole. And yet, the closed doors hold darker secrets too. Some women cry into their sleeves, their muffled sobs hidden from attendants. Others write farewell letters that will never leave the palace, tucking them into pillows like offerings to no one. You sometimes wonder, if all those doors could suddenly swing open at once, how many hidden griefs would spill out like a flood? Still, in this hidden world, there's also resilience. Behind those doors, concubines carved out spaces for laughter, intimacy, and even defiance. It wasn't enough to break free, but it was enough to keep breathing. And maybe that was the point. Not to escape, but to endure. You thought gossip was sharp enough to wound, but here in the palace, whispers sometimes carry something heavier, something that clings like smoke in the lungs. The quietest stories are about poison, and they travel not in shouts but in breaths. A handmaid pouring tea too slowly, a cup returned untouched, a plate of delicacies left cooling because someone dared to wonder, what if? You sit down to your meal, the lacquered table glinting with bowls of fragrant dishes, and suddenly every bite feels like a decision between courage and caution. That slice of pear, so crisp and sweet, might be harmless, or it might not. You notice how other women wait just long enough to see who eats first, how some shift the food on their plates instead of lifting it to their lips. The tension could almost ruin your appetite, except appetite itself is dangerous here. Poison in the palace wasn't always dramatic. It wasn't goblets shattering to the floor or instant collapses like in the theater. More often, it was slow. An ache in the belly, a faintness in the morning, a decline so subtle you'd wonder if the heavens themselves had withdrawn favor. The most chilling detail? Sometimes the emperor would order a physician to observe, not to cure. They'd record every symptom like scientists experimenting with fate. Historians still debate how many deaths in the palace were accidents, illnesses, or carefully orchestrated disappearances cloaked as natural. And then there's the punishment that followed, as brutal as the crime was secret. A concubine caught in a plot might not face a grand trial. She could be handed a cup of medicine and told it was time to drink. Some were forced to end their lives with silk cords, others banished so completely their names dissolved from the scrolls. You realize, in a shiver of recognition, that forgetting someone can be the sharpest punishment of all. What makes it stranger is how ordinary the instruments of death were. A sprig of herbs crushed into powder, a porcelain spoon left on a tray, even cosmetics, rouge, or face powder that carried a kiss of something toxic. You once heard that lead-based makeup was so common, it's a miracle anyone's skin survived. Imagine painting your lips only to wonder if beauty itself was betraying you. The eunuchs, of course, were often blamed, their hands suspected whenever a tray of food arrived too warm or too cold. Yet, it was just as likely that rival consorts arranged things in shadows. A look, a word, a bribe, and suddenly dinner carried more than flavor. And the cruel irony? Even if no poison touched your lips, suspicion alone could sour everything. That bowl of lotus soup might as well be a dagger, because you can't relax enough to taste it. Still, poison wasn't only about death. Sometimes it was theater. Just the suggestion of it was enough to destroy. A rumor that your tea smelled strange, or that your maid hesitated before pouring, could plant doubts impossible to erase. The fear itself was poison, spreading faster than anything ground into powder. As you lie awake, the thought curls around you like mist. In this place, danger isn't loud or obvious. It seeps quietly, as silent as water soaking through silk. You start to wonder, if your lips ever did go numb, would anyone bother to write your story, or would you simply fade? Another forgotten shadow in a palace where shadows already outnumber the living? And so you learn. Survival isn't just about keeping favor with the emperor or navigating jealous rivals. It's about trusting every sip, every bite, every breath, and realizing you might never trust completely again. The palace is full of echoes, soft footsteps, rustling robes, hushed secrets, and sometimes, the lightest echo of all is a child's laughter. It cuts through the silence like a bell, startling in its innocence, because here behind jade doors and painted screens, children are never just children. They are the future, the fragile threads upon which a concubine's fate might hang. When you first hear the cry of a newborn, it feels like a blessing. For the mother, it can mean rising like a comet through the ranks, suddenly favored, suddenly untouchable, because she has given the emperor something no silken smile or artful dance ever could, blood that carries his name. The other women bow lower, the servants rush faster, and for a moment, life seems sweeter. A bowl of rice tastes more fragrant, a robe of silk feels warmer. The child is a tiny shield, a promise of protection. But soon enough, you notice the weight of eyes. Everyone watches the baby, and not always with love. A prince, even as an infant, represents a shift in power. He is a pawn, a weapon, a bargaining chip in a game so vast he cannot even crawl across the mat yet. A princess, too, though less politically charged, can still bind alliances through marriage. And so these children, innocent as they are, become the center of storms. You see mothers guard their little ones fiercely, never letting them out of sight, as if the nursery walls themselves might sprout daggers. Some concubines hide their children's beauty, dressing them plainly, whispering to the heavens not to let them shine too brightly, for fear that rivals might see brilliance as a threat. Strange, isn't it? In the world outside, parents brag about their child's cleverness. Here, cleverness can paint a target on a tiny back, and history leaves traces of this unease. Stories tell of infants who died suddenly in their cradles, or boys who grew sick under mysterious circumstances. Was it illness? Was it neglect? Or was it something darker? Historians still debate, tracing half-erased notes in dusty chronicles, wondering if palace doctors sometimes recorded lies to protect powerful names. Even the upbringing of children was a battlefield. They were often raised not by their birth mothers but by senior consorts or dowager empresses, a practice meant to ensure fairness but often weaponized to strip a woman of her only leverage. Imagine, you endure the endless nights of pregnancy, the fear of childbirth in a world where survival is uncertain, and just when your baby breathes safely, he is taken into another woman's arms. You smile in public, bow gracefully, but inside your heart fractures into pieces too sharp to mend. Still, there were rare moments of softness. A child's small hand wrapping around your finger, a laugh echoing down a tiled corridor, a group of little ones chasing each other with clumsy steps across a hidden garden. For a breath, the palace feels almost human again, almost normal, like a household instead of a cage. You can almost forget that every giggle is shadowed by politics, every toy by strategy. Sometimes, as you watch the children, you wonder what they know. Do they sense the tension in the air, the way grown-ups freeze when certain names are spoken? Do they notice how mothers' smiles are too tight, how lullabies sometimes sound like prayers? Perhaps they do. Perhaps that's why even the youngest seem so solemn at times, their wide eyes carrying a weight they should never bear. And yet, you can't help but feel hope stir whenever you see them. They are fragile symbols of continuity, proof that life continues even in a place ruled by fear and favor. They are also your mirror, reminding you of the stakes you live with each day. In their cries and laughter, you hear not only the future of the dynasty but also the pulse of your own survival. So you linger in the nursery longer than you should, listening to those tiny voices. For just a while, you let yourself imagine a different palace. One where children grow up free of schemes, where mothers keep their babies close, where laughter is only laughter, not a sign of coming storms. But the candle flickers, and reality returns. Here, even the cradle rocks on political fault lines. And as you step away, you whisper silently, "May the gods guard them, because the palace never truly will." When the night draws in and the palace grows still, you might think silence rules these gilded walls. But no, listen closely, and you'll hear a different language humming through the air. The twang of a chain, the trembling note of a flute, the scratch of an ink brush over silk. Here, in a place where a single wrong word can destroy you, art becomes not just beauty, but survival. You sit in a long hall, the lacquered beams above you painted with swirling clouds and cranes. Before you, a group of concubines practice music. Their fingers move lightly across strings, each note carefully chosen, each sound as deliberate as a chess move. Music here is not for joy alone, it is for persuasion. A single performance could draw the emperor's eye or, just as easily, remind him of someone he wishes to forget. Imagine karaoke night, except the judge isn't your drunk cousin. It's the man who controls whether you rise to power or vanish into obscurity. No pressure, right? And poetry, it flows like whispered secrets. In the garden pavilions, you find women composing verses under lantern light. Their ink strokes graceful, their metaphors sharp. A clever poem might flatter the emperor, a hidden allusion might strike at a rival, and a perfectly crafted line might earn a nod from the Empress Dowager herself. Even silence can be turned into verse, the way one woman's sigh becomes the subject of another's writing. You realize quickly, every word is a performance, every syllable another stone in the palace chessboard. Calligraphy too carries weight. A bold hand suggests strength of spirit, while a delicate style might charm as gentle femininity. Eunuchs sometimes slip these works into the emperor's study, leaving them to accidentally catch his eye. Picture it like slipping your resume onto the boss's desk. But instead of listing your skills, you're hoping the curve of your brushstroke convinces him you're worth remembering. And yet, art is also refuge. Some nights, you hear a concubine plucking her chain softly, not for the court, but for herself, the music curling through the chamber like a private lullaby. For a moment, her shoulders drop, her face softens, and she almost looks like any woman at peace. Those are the rare instances where the palace feels less like a stage and more like a sanctuary. But of course, even beauty can sting. Rivalries are sharpened through these displays. One woman's flawless dance becomes another's humiliation. A single sour note, whispered about enough, can erode someone's reputation like water dripping on stone. And historians still debate which concubines truly mastered their arts out of passion, and which practiced only because they knew the cost of failing was invisibility. You can't help but be swept into it yourself. The fragrance of ink, the soft glow of lanterns, the clatter of brushes being rinsed. Every detail is intoxicating. When you close your eyes, you can almost forget the danger that lingers beneath. Almost. Because here, even the gentlest song carries hidden meaning. Even the prettiest poem masks a blade. And so you sit a little straighter, sharpen your own brush, let your fingertips find the strings. Because in this palace, art isn't just art, it's armor. And without it, you'd be defenseless. Seasons here don't just pass. They press themselves into the palace walls, carving rhythms so precise you could almost measure your life by the shift of the wind. You find yourself becoming attuned to them, as if the forbidden city itself were a vast clock, ticking forward not with gears but with frost, blossoms, rains, and heat. Winter arrives first, heavy and uncompromising. The palace roofs, with their golden tiles, vanish beneath sheets of snow that glitter like powdered jade. Eunuchs shuffle quickly, breath misting in the air, their hands hidden inside long sleeves. You hear the crunch of boots over ice as firewood is hauled into the women's quarters. But the cold is more than inconvenience, it is hierarchy itself, written in temperature. Higher-ranked consorts sit close to grand braziers, flames licking warmly at their silks, while lower-ranked women huddle at the edges, trying not to shiver. Imagine sharing a house with central heating but only one thermostat and you don't get to touch it. Then spring slides in, tentative, with peach blossoms scattering across courtyards. The air smells faintly sweet, and the palace seems to breathe again. Concubines stroll through gardens in pastel robes, hoping the emperor might notice their blossoming just as much as the trees. It's romantic, yes, but also strategic. This is the season of renewal, of chances to be seen, of aligning yourself with growth and vitality. And somewhere in the mix, a few unlucky women suffer from spring fevers, coughing quietly as others take advantage of their weakness. Historians still debate whether those illnesses were natural or conveniently timed. Summer, though, that's when the palace feels like a test. The courtyards blaze under a punishing sun, tiles hot enough to sear through thin shoes. Fans flutter endlessly, painted silk waving like desperate wings, but the air refuses to move. The palace kitchens boil with activity, serving cool melon and iced drinks to the favored, while others make do with tepid water. You wipe sweat from your brow and wonder how anyone maintains dignity when their silk robes cling like damp rags. Some concubines retreat indoors, afraid their makeup will run. Others risk fainting in the gardens just for a chance encounter. And through it all, jealousy burns hotter than the weather. Autumn finally descends, sharp and golden. Chrysanthemums bloom in courtyards, their petals like tiny suns, and banquets are held to celebrate the harvest. The air carries a crispness that feels almost like relief. You walk through fallen leaves crunching underfoot, and the palace seems quieter, more reflective. Yet it's also the season of reckoning. Year-end rituals, ancestor offerings, and the emperor's evaluations remind you that survival is measured not only in months lived but in influence retained. For some, autumn brings reward. For others, it foreshadows a winter they may not survive. What strikes you most is how each season isn't just background. It shapes behavior, plots, and moods. A blossom might inspire a poem, a storm might delay an audience, a freezing draft might decide who spends the night closest to the emperor's warmth. The palace is less a static prison and more a living organism, breathing with the weather. And so you find yourself counting not by days but by shifts of the air. The first snow, the first flower, the first thunder, the first leaf that falls. Each one whispers the same message: you are still here. You have made it through another cycle. And if you're very lucky, you'll be here for the next. Time is the one rival you can never outwit, and in the palace, it creeps with a cruelty sharper than any blade. You notice it first not in yourself but in others. Fine lines hidden beneath heavy powders, hairpins that once gleamed on raven-black hair now resting against strands dulled by years of incense smoke. Beauty here is a currency, and every day it loses a little of its value. You walk the same corridors you once strode through with confidence, and now eunuchs barely lift their eyes. The emperor, who once leaned close to catch your whispered jokes, now strolls past without pausing. You hear laughter spilling from a distant chamber, the laughter of younger women who have replaced you, their voices bright, their charms effortless. It stings like being unsubscribed from your own life's channel, without warning, without appeal. Decline doesn't always come as a dramatic exile. Sometimes it's quieter. You might still live in gilded chambers, still wear silk robes, but the air grows colder, emptier. The fruit on your tray isn't as fresh. The letters you write go unanswered. Even the guards outside your quarters grow lax, as though they know nothing important happens here anymore. But sometimes the fall is swift and merciless. A jealous glance mistaken for insolence, a rumor whispered into the wrong ear, a single misstep during a ceremony, and suddenly a favored consort finds herself demoted, her family's fortunes shattered overnight. The corridors that once echoed with her silvery laughter now carry only silence. One day she is radiant under the emperor's gaze. The next, she is gone, spirited away to a lonely pavilion where only dust keeps her company. Historians still debate which was crueler, the quiet fading or the spectacular fall. Some women were allowed to live out their days in half-forgotten peace, their names smudged in the records. Others became cautionary tales, their disgrace written in bold strokes so that future generations could whisper about them in half-amused, half-pitying tones. You feel it in your bones. This place doesn't let you age gracefully. It strips you down, layer by layer, until all that's left is the memory of who you were. A few concubines, cleverer than most, turn to religion, copying Buddhist sutras or chanting softly at dawn. Others pour their fading energy into mentoring younger women, hoping that, in exchange, they might be remembered kindly. And some simply withdraw, like candles burning themselves out in silence. As you stand at the window one evening, the sky painted in streaks of red and gold, you realize the palace doesn't care who you are. It outlasts you. It swallows names and spits out echoes. Your life here has been both extraordinary and invisible, a paradox wrapped in silk. And you wonder, with a quiet pang, whether anyone beyond these walls will ever remember you. Not as a concubine, not as a rival, but simply as yourself. The palace grows quiet now, quieter than you have ever known it. The torches sputter in their brackets, and the courtyards, once filled with laughter, music, and the rustle of silk, are nothing more than wide pools of shadow. You can almost hear the weight of centuries pressing down, the voices of those who came before whispering faintly against the stone. It is not frightening, more like the hushed murmur of a lullaby you've half forgotten, returning just as your eyes begin to close. You sense the outlines of stories lingering here, even when the bodies are gone. Each chamber has soaked in secrets. Each garden path remembers footsteps. If you listen carefully, you can still hear faint echoes. The rustle of a young concubine rehearsing a song she never got to sing. The brittle laugh of a favorite who once believed she was untouchable. The soft sob of someone realizing her family will never see her again. These moments don't disappear. They settle into the air, woven into the palace like threads into a tapestry. And you, after all you've walked through, become part of that fabric too. Your laughter, your envy, your fleeting triumphs, your regrets, all folded neatly into the same pattern. You find comfort in knowing that though your name may fade, your existence lingers in the walls themselves, a presence that future generations will never quite name but will always feel. Perhaps one evening, centuries from now, someone will pause at a certain corridor and shiver, not from cold but from the brush of your memory passing by. The Forbidden City does not end when its people leave. Carries them, carries you, and just as the seasons turned, just as dynasties rose and crumbled, your story becomes part of the larger rhythm, dissolving into history's vast embrace. So now, as the night deepens, you let go. You feel the palace fading, its lanterns dimming, its voices slipping further away, until all that remains is the steady hush of your own breath. The tension softens, your limbs grow heavy, and the weight of centuries finally lifts. Close your eyes. Drift with the echoes. Let the walls cradle you as they have cradled countless before you. You are safe. You are remembered. You are home.